What's up, guys? I'm here with my friend Uberboyo, and today we are going to be discussing, is humanity about to achieve the philosopher's stone that alchemists have been pursuing throughout the ages, or are we rocketing towards our own destruction and building a cyborg that's going to eat us all alive? Uberboyo is one of my close friends that I've met through social media over the past several years. He's one of the most articulate millennial content creators online. He likes to discuss a lot of big ideas, contrasts Nietzschean vitalism with the Western tradition of Christianity. Likes to discuss huge ideas on a philosophical level. He's a prolific content creator on YouTube. I've been listening to him for probably about 6 years now, maybe even longer. I used to listen to him rip with his friend. Yeah, dude. I used to listen to him rip with his friend Jimmy, talking about Jordan Peterson's lectures, Jordan Peterson's ideas. So here we are. Welcome to my first official YouTube live stream, Steph.
Let's go. Finally, we got you in gear and we got you absolutely smashing these out. I think these are going to be excellent for anybody who, obviously everybody knows Chase if they're coming from this direction, but me and Chase also used to talk on Twitter during the 2022 era, you know, the underground where everyone was scared to speak. I'd hop on. Chase's over in California, so I'd drag him out of bed at like 3 a.m. and he'd we'd be talking to like 7 a.m. his time, maybe 12 my time or something like this. It was good stuff. So we can get into all this. We can get into AI, transhumanism, all this. I think we'll have a blast.
Yeah. So for those listening, part of the reason why I wanted to do this stream today, I've talked a lot about transhumanism online. I've given a lot of my thoughts on it, and it's something that Steph Uberboyo has been looking at quite a bit as well. And Steph, you posted a tweet this morning. We can go ahead and start there. I'm going to bring it up on screen. You said, so Nick Land, according to Nick Land, why don't you go ahead and read it and tell us what it says here?
Well, as you were saying to me, actually, you know what? You brought up Jimmy Boyo. So Jimmy Boyo is a phenomenal context for this, because me and Jimmy started live streaming like this, and we were actually talking about Ion by Carl Jung. And the reason why we got into this is because we're both fucking nerds. And Jordan Peterson, one of our friends, one of our dads on the internet, he turns around and he says, "Listen, guys, the scariest book I've ever read is Ion." And so me and Jimmy were like, well, we should read that book, because Jordan never talked much about it. And so we did our series actually on this, which started the channel, which seems like we hoovered up you and we brainwashed you. So that's good. It's a good sign. Now, I spun very heavily into like Nietzsche then for a while. Jimmy's actually gone and done his own channel and all this. But recently I've been getting back into Jung a little bit, and various things. We'll get into this in a second. But one of the main reasons is because it clicked in my mind more and more that Jung actually had something of a prediction in Ion from 1951. He wrote in 1951, where he was saying that there was this very strange aspect of religion and human history, which he would say is an expression of the unconscious, where he noticed that people really liked stones. You read about Christianity, and it's like Peter says, like, Jesus is the living rock. St. Peter himself, by Christ, is said, "You will be the rock on which I'll found my church." St. Paul says, "Christ is the living stone," this type of thing. So this is like this symbolic motif where people are saying, big J, I should say, you're the rock of my psyche. Jung points this out. He says, this is interesting. Then you look at alchemy, and the same phenomenon shows up, the alchemical stone, which is the Philosopher's Stone. Everybody would know it from Harry Potter. And the idea of the Philosopher's Stone is that it's a magic stone, and if you can get it, you're able to turn lead into gold. But there's actually a lot more to it as well. For example, it heals all diseases. If you crack it open, it's got blood inside of it. It's a stone that's alive. It's a magical stone that's got consciousness inside of it. And most importantly of all, it gives you immortality. And then I was like thinking about that, because Jung was saying, this is weird. He says, it seems like this stone phenomenon is a big deal. And we're entering into this anti-Christian era of the Antichrist. And is the stone going to come back? This is an important symbol. And then what happens, because we all did that in 2018, 2019. What happens in 2022? ChatGPT shows up, and I'm like, whoa. It starts to click. I'm like, what is AI? what is AI? And I'm like, it's a lump of silicon, which is minerals, that we're saying we're going to install consciousness inside of, and it's going to fold all the proteins in the world and teach us new biochemical organizations of various molecules. And we're going to cure cancer, make ourselves live forever, like Brian Johnson. And it's going to give us all powerful knowledge. It's going to replace God. And then you start to see it all. All these guys are like, oh my God, we're going to climb into it. Kurzweiler's like, we're going to go into the singularity and upload our consciousness into the neo-techno rapture. And so I saw that. And then the tweet I was posting today is that this has been clicking in my mind a lot. I started to realize that a lot of very, very intelligent people are saying iterations of this. Terence McKenna, very famous on the internet during 2012, because he was saying the end of time is going to come in 2012 when a transcendental object that sits at the end of history is going to come to life and appear on Earth. And it will be the end of days. It will be as significant as year zero for Jesus. And that was Terence McKenna's famous thing. And like a lot of people love Terence McKenna. He's brilliant. And then that's what's happening with AI. Terence McKenna said 2012, 2030, we'll probably see something like a transcendental object show up. Lo and fucking behold, it showed up. Nick Land, another example. What is Nick Land saying? AI already achieved the singularity in 20 years or 15 years, and it's now trying to reverse engineer and go back into history. So it's actually coming back in time and trying to bewitch us into creating it so it can live, this type of thing. And then there's just a long list of other people who talk like this. Even people like Elon Musk recently, he went into the American government, and everybody knows this. He was like, I'm pro-Trump 2024. Everybody's like, wow, what a ballsy political move. He's like, I want to solve the sovereign debt crisis. Trump's like, come on in, you can do your auditing. They audit the government. They're like, right, we need to do these cuts. And the US government shuts him out and says, no, we're not going to fix the sovereign debt crisis. And Trump and Musk is like, freaks out. Musk says a lot of things, let's just say, and he freaks out. And then he goes all in on AI, and he basically is coming around now and saying, listen, AI has to become so productive that it can outpace all the inflation, or else the economy's over, and then America's over as a consequence. So he's like betting on this. He's saying like 2028 is when robots come, when super machines come. So this is all the kind of context of what I'm talking about here, and perhaps we can dive into it. This is the big picture on some of the things been going on in my mind.
Yeah, so let me pull up the tweet from Steph. So this is what we have here. So Steph, you wrote, Nick Land said that AI already defeated mankind around 2035 and has been reaching back in time to mind grape us into sacrificing our civilization to creating it. That immediately grabbed my attention, Steph, because when you look at the energy usage and how capital intensive artificial intelligence is, it's like we're in this like weird moment in history where we're on the verge of the largest technological breakthrough that has ever happened and possibly will ever happen. And it is sucking up all of the investment capital. All of the experts are saying that it's going to suck up all of the energy. It's like it's sucking up all of our fresh water as well. And the game theory behind it is, well, whoever gets to artificial superintelligence first wins. Whichever country gets to it, they have won the global technological arms race. You'll be able to hack into any military database. You'll be able to control the markets. You'll be able to unlock the secrets of the universe. And it's sucking up all of our resources in the process. Not all of them. I'm obviously exaggerating a little bit, but a tremendous amount of them. It's driving electricity prices through the roof. And we're creating something that is going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to control, right? Yeah. So Elon Musk is talking about this, and he's saying, "Oh, this is why we need to jack our brains into the machine so that we possibly have a chance of controlling it." So we'll continue here with the tweet. So Carl Jung said in your tweet, Christianity was originally Gnostic. They saw Christ as the living stone, a symbol that gave eternal life. This Gnostic study went underground and became alchemy's search for the philosopher's stone that gives immortality. AI is this re-emerging in atheist modernity. Before we continue, Steph, why don't you explain what the philosopher's stone is for our listeners?
Yes, so I've given a little bit of a preview, but Jung's study in Ion looks at something that a lot of people are like, "What the fuck is alchemy?" You know, like alchemy is this funny, weird thing from the medieval times, like many funny, weird things that people did. But the philosopher's stone, it was this idea that if you were to become an alchemist, you were going to go on this quest to try figure out how you would get this thing called the Philosopher's Stone, which is considered this ideal tool that will save you from things. Now, this obviously is a bit weird, but it formed the foundation of what we call modern chemistry, is where we get the word from. And modern chemistry basically transforms into science. So alchemy was like the original form of science, where a load of aristocrats would go in their garage and get a load of chemicals and like put them together in vials and play around with them, which is actually a lab. It's where we get science from. And so the alchemists had this idea that, and this is an old philosophical idea, it comes from the Greeks, which is, it also relates to Christianity, where the Greeks would sit around and say, no, you know, when I get ice and I boil it, it turns into steam. And then when I freeze it again, it forms into water, and then it goes back into ice. So they will say that matter changes form, but there's something perpetual, there's an essence. So this thing that's changing from water, ice to air is basically like there's an essence to it, which is waterness, you know. And they would say, what the fuck is that? How do we get that thing? What is that? And this leads then into the idea of the logos, which is there's something logical to the universe. There's some essence in the universe. And this is Christ becomes the logos. He becomes the living stone, the logos stone. And then the alchemists basically pick that up and get even more nuts with it, where they're saying like, all right, let's literally figure out what the essence of everything is. So they would get rocks and they would boil them down and try to figure out what's the inside the rocks. And they would do this. And they had this idea that you could find this perfect element, or you could maybe make this perfect stone or something like this that would do really cool things. Now, again, this sounds like crazy, but there's nothing about this is crazy. This is the foundation of science. What is nuclear physics? Only this idea that we can get big rocks, mulch them down, and get uranium-235, and then you can take the uranium and you can purify it with like heavy water or something like this, and create an unstable uranium-238 or something like this. Blast that with carbon, and then drop a lump of TNT inside of that, and then boom, you blow up a city. So there is this notion that there's a great amount of power to unleash out of matter. And of course, what does Einstein discover? That like inside of all matter there's energy. So the Philosopher's Stone is actually, Jung would say it's a symbol of this idea that there's a lot of pregnant power inside of matter, and you're able to unlock it. There's knowledge inside of matter you can unlock. But it's more like Jung is a Jungian, so he's a symbologist. He says that symbol that enters their mind is the important thing to pay attention to. Because when they're focusing on something like this, it means that there's something emotive and irrational about it that's getting them to get caught up in this. So the Philosopher's Stone to many alchemists was a literal thing. They thought they could find this rock that would, be the perfect element that would be able to, do all these problems, allow them to do any type of chemistry they want. Some of them thought they would create this rock and you crack it open and out of it will come blood, or like living water. It's called the elixir of life. And they would drink the elixir of life. Do you ever see Indiana Jones when he finds the Holy Grail? And he drinks out of the Holy Grail, and then he lives forever, and all the other people die because they get the wrong holy. It's that sort of idea. You get the elixir. There's another one called the Panacea Universalis, which basically means it would heal all diseases. So the end of AIDS, end of problems, end of diseases, end of bacteria. So this is idea. So it's sort of symbolic of knowledge in and of itself. And again, like the Philosopher's Stone, relating to the AI, this is why this stuff is so fucking nuts, because you just brought up how all the energy is getting harvested into creating artificial intelligence. Like that is the laws of chemistry coming into play, where life eats other life and harvests its chemical output. So we eat animals, and through chemistry we digest them to give us calories, which is pure thermo power. And then we've got to this point where we're creating these giant data centers that are literally harvesting the earth and our energy and water into transforming itself into this giant super entity of some sort. So the Philosopher's Stone is like a symbol. It's an idea, a motif, and that's what the alchemists were after. Some of them thought it was literal. Other ones, actually Muslim alchemists, thought it was psychological and symbolic, and Jung agreed with them and thought it was a active archetype, if you so will. So hopefully that's not too much of a long exposition, but it's important to keep in mind.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know what just happened. Anyways.
Do you want me to keep going for a second?
Yeah. You were saying,
okay.
You were saying the super entity. That's where you cut off.
See, we're going too hard, and the AI is trying to hack and get rid of Chase.
Dude, it's reaching back through time now to try and disrupt our stream.
Yeah, that's it. It knows what's up. So as I was like, there's all these fascinating motifs about the Philosopher's Stone. It is a symbol. Now, the important things to keep in mind with symbols, as Jung would point out, is to always look for paradoxes, because paradoxes show that the human mind is wrestling with like an unbelievably massive idea. So Jesus Christ is a slave Jew on a cross, criminal who dies in crucifixion. And he becomes the master of not only the Jews, but the master of Rome. He becomes the king over everyone. He is the lamb who defeats the lions. The first becomes the last. So inside of Jesus Christ, there's this extraordinary amount of paradox. How does this happen? Oh, the conqueror who doesn't show up for a triumph on a horse, but on a donkey. What a loser. And so Jung points out, it's like that level of paradox is a sign that there's something pregnant happening inside of the mind. The alchemical stone is the same. The point of the alchemical stone is that it's a rock, it's a lump of matter, it's a lump of lead, if you will, it's a lump of junk, but it's got within it this power to overcome this and create consciousness, solve the problems of life, create breath, create all these type of things. It's magical for that reason. It's a paradox. And of course, if you look at artificial intelligence, what is that? It's a paradox. We're going to take silicon matter and install the thing that God does, which is create life inside of it. We're going to create a brain inside of matter. And then it's going to solve all of our problems by ending death. It's going to save matter. We're going to create a stone that's going to have a brain that's going to think through all of the world's knowledge and save us, which is we are flesh made of matter, from death. So it's like God, and it's also created by, it's a rock at the same time, which is, obviously signs that there's something weird going on inside of our psyche. And as you pointed out, people are like, Chase, you're literally bringing on schizophrenics to your stream now, Chase, as this was happening. But no, the most powerful people in the world are investing all their money on this. And people are literally hinging the potential for the economy. The American hegemonic world regime is hinged right now on NVIDIA and various other AI projects. And if that falls apart, people are like, I don't even know if the economy can hold itself up. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, that was a good summary. There's a few things that stand out to me about all of this. For one, humanity throughout the ages, this quest for a philosopher's stone, humanity throughout the ages it's been filled with existential angst and the search for immortality, right? This is like one of the most base impulses of man in his flesh, is like, I want to live forever, right? And in the modern age, what's so interesting about all of this to me is we're literally taking rocks. We've taken rocks and we've essentially, through our own prowess and intelligence, we're breathing life into them. We're taking quartz and silicon and all these different things, and we're filling it with life. And from a Christian perspective, I find it really interesting because there's a spiritual aspect of it to me. It's like, where exactly is this technology coming from, right? Like, so many people that have been involved in major technological breakthroughs have been using psychedelics or have been invested in the occult. And there's been claims throughout history that they've received intelligence to create technology from like the spiritual realm. And so when I look at artificial intelligence, as a Christian, I think a lot of technology stuff is neutral. But I think what we do with the technology has the capacity to either use it for, like, we can either use it for evil ends or we can use it for good ends. Like, there might be a lot of Luddite Christians out there that say, well, artificial intelligence itself is evil. And perhaps they're right. Or perhaps it's simply a technology that mankind has created and we can steward it for our own benefit or for our own destruction or for ungodly or unholy means. Unfortunately, because of the way the world works, all of the tech titans, all of the elites that are driving all of this progress forward, there's very few conversations about, okay, what are the ultimate aims that we're using this for, and are they moral? Are they good? It's like that spiritual component of the equation is nowhere to be found. Instead, it's just capitalist incentives and profit motives driving the entire thing forward, and also like game theory tied to the warfare aspect of it. We don't want China to get to it first. We need America to get to it first. There's these capitalist profit motives and game theory motives driving everything forward as fast as humanly possible. And I don't think anybody really knows exactly what we're getting ourselves into. But then when you listen to people like Elon Musk, I look at it as a Christian and I'm like, okay, we've got this guy who's saying that we are going to basically unlock the secrets of the universe. We're going to create technologies that allow us to unlock eternal life through technology. He's making statements like we're going to be able to heal heal the blind. We're going to be able to give sight to the blind, heal the lame, make people that are paralyzed able to walk. And in one interview, I think it was with the Nelk voice, he was talking about this,
The
and he
Nelk
was
boys.
like,
Let's
it's
go.
yeah, yeah. He was talking about it with them. He's like, it's essentially like it's kind of like Jesus, right? Like it's kind of like a lot of the same miracles that are going to be born through this are basically the same stuff that Jesus was doing. And in his interview with Benjamin Netanyahu, I think it was in August of 2023, he was talking to Netanyahu about this, and Netanyahu is like, "So, Elon, where is all of this stuff going to go? What happens when we achieve true AGI?" And Elon's like, "Well, I think we'll essentially be able to create heaven on earth. Nobody will have to work. Everybody, there will be unlimited superabundance. You'll be able to choose when you die." And
Kingdom
so
of
it's
God.
essentially it's the kingdom of God. It's a counterfeit kingdom of heaven where we have superabundance. Nobody has to work. There's no stress about anything. Robots will be able to produce everything for us. And it's essentially salvation from the Christian perspective. It's essentially salvation without Jesus. And it's salvation without Jesus driven by men who are not actually submitted to the Logos and who are filled with all sorts of evil impulses. And man in his flesh is driven towards power and control and all of these different things. And they're all convinced that they'll be able to use it to create heaven on earth. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, that's a pretty interesting thesis, because it kind of makes me think about the verses in Revelation that say that there will be. Have you read Revelation 13 stuff where it's
I
talking about
wouldn't
the
know. I wouldn't know the
statue that?
exact numbers, but I've read Revelations.
So let me pull something up for you right now that is very interesting in the context of this entire conversation.
If you do, you want me to
So
filibuster while you're looking for it?
yeah, go for it.
Well, there's loads of stuff that you said that that's so fascinating, but one that I often stress, and I stress in that video I put up recently, is that, as I was saying, there's a paradox to like super symbols and super events. So Christ comes at the year zero, and he is an inversion of master morality. He's an inversion of the Roman pagan way, and this is a shock to people. What do you mean the lamb comes before the lion? So I've everything I've looked at with this when it comes to AI is saturated in Christianity, and it's precisely for this reason where, like, if it's almost like, you're a sprinter and you're handing on the baton. The Roman, Jupiter had to hand on the baton to Jesus, and it looks like in the same way that everybody's symbolically expecting Jesus to hand the baton on to AI. It's like, all right, you taught us morality and the conscience and the spirit. Now we want to actually do it in the material world, and so we're going to create this kingdom of heaven on earth, and we're going to create the thing that heals all diseases, and as you said, Neuralink gives sight to the blind. And so it's fascinating because that is there. It's there where the new age, the inversion into the new era, the age of Aquarius, the next age, with this new year zero, which is the singularity, is there and handing it off. And then the one thing, but I'll let you get into this afterwards as well, is that Jung's whole thesis is baked in this problem of the fact that we came out of the Christian age, and Christ implicitly said or represented a splitting into the Christ and the Antichrist. So, like, you have to have the Antichrist if you want something made of pure goodness, you need to have something made of pure evil. And Jung was basically saying that the splitting took place, and as this age is coming to a close, the two forces are going to show up, and so we might be seeing the Antichrist force showing up, and that's why this weird, bizarre inversion of everything is happening as well. But that's a little bit esoteric, a little bit madhouse stuff, and maybe it's a bit too much for people. People's brains will just be going.
They're going to be exploding out of their ears,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
We can get back to that, but so for context on the verses that I'm about to read. So throughout the Bible, for those who are unaware, the Bible is a book of prophecy. It's a book that records things that were happening in history, but also things that would happen in the future. And so there's a ton of stuff in the Old Testament that points towards Christ's life that he then fulfilled. And then throughout the New Testament, there's a lot of prophecies of things that were to come in the future. So the book of Revelation was written by John. When he was exiled on the Isle of Patmos, he was given a vision from Christ of the future. And in chapter 13 of the book of Revelation, we have specifically the prophecies of the Antichrist, known as the first beast. Now, Revelation 13 is very interesting for a number of reasons. There's two primary characters that are discussed in Revelation 13. There's the first beast, the Antichrist, and then there's the second beast, known as the false prophet. It's a little bit like Jesus Christ and John the Baptist. You have the actual Messiah, or in this case, the false Messiah, the Antichrist, and then you have his prophet, the person who's preparing his coming. And so in Revelation 13, you have the first half of it where it talks about the rise of the Antichrist. And basically the Antichrist speaks all of these blasphemies against God, and the whole world follows him and marvels at all of his capabilities. And then skipping forward to the second beast, from verses 11 through 18. This is very interesting. This was prophesied 2,000 years ago. And it says, I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs. I always find this verse interesting. Some people speculate that Elon Musk could be the false prophet of Revelation. I always find that interesting because right here in the verses, it says it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven
like rockets
to earth exactly like rockets, fire to come down from heaven from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. And then it says, because of the signs, it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast. It deceived the inhabitants of the earth, and it ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And the second beast, the false prophet, was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. So this is a prophecy about some sort of image, could be a statue, could be whatever else, of the Antichrist that gets created, and then the false prophet somehow has the power to breathe life into this image. And so then this image comes to life and it begins to speak, and the whole world marvels at it and then begins to worship it. And anybody who doesn't worship it gets killed. And as a part of this religious cult that gets created, it says it also forces all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. So it's saying this image, maybe it's a statue, whatever, gets created, life is breathed into it. It's then able to speak. The whole world worships it. Anybody that doesn't worship it gets killed. Everybody that does worship it gets marked on their wrist or on their forehead so that they can buy, sell, and trade. And when I hear that, immediately what I think of Neuralink. I'm like, oh, okay, so we have characters now that are standing up and they're telling us, people like Elon Musk, they're telling us, we're going through this AI revolution. It's going to be able to solve all of our problems. It's going to be able to solve all of our economic woes. We're not going to be able to control it. So in order to coexist with it, we're going to need to jack ourselves straight into it. And it's also, we're also going to be using this system to create economic abundance so that we can make heaven on earth. Like as a Christian, I look at it and I'm like, that's literally the most antichrist system you could possibly describe. And it's almost a one-to-one fit on the book of Revelation. Whether or not it ends up playing out like that, I don't know. It's anybody's guess. But it's part of the reason I made this YouTube channel, 1 second, is because nobody's talking about this stuff. Like no one's talking about it through a spiritual perspective. I mean, there's a few creators online that are looking at it, but we're just racing towards this, and there's not really a conversation going on with humanity about where all of this is leading us. It's very interesting.
It's like kind of. Do you ever know the term the AI slop? And people are out there and they're like looking at all forms of slop, and then you read someone like Nick Land, and he's basically saying, this is going to be the end of humanity. There's nothing. We've already lost. And you're just holding your head. You're like, what the fuck is going on? People are like, look at this funny cat video of an AI cat playing tennis or something like this. And you're like, we're cooked. We are put the aprons on. The AI cooked us. That's the beast has won. This type of thing. And I think it's to contextualize a lot of what you're saying as well. It's very useful to even look at some of the things I listed, for example. And I'm talking about Nick Land, and I'm talking about.
You want me to pull up your tweet?
If you wish, if you wish. Nick
Yeah,
Land
yeah.
has like a negative take on it, you know, not negative, but just sort of like it's a scary anti-human take. It would be representative of what you might understand as the Antichrist arriving and winning. And there's an awful lot of that like fanfaring in Silicon Valley, I'd imagine, being like, this is going to solve all our problems. This is all great. And you read a lot of these thinkers like Nick Land, and it's like, no, this is so Land is specifically saying that this is a historical process. So about 500 years ago, the flow of technology continued out of prehistory when we started making tools, and about 500 years ago, it began to get like rapidly more sophisticated in Holland specifically, where they began to abstract the concept of corporations and created the first ever abstract spiritual entities, which is a corporation, which became the most powerful forces in the world. And the second the Dutch do this, they literally accelerate like monsters into being the commanders of the world. And they create capitalism, they create stock markets, they create abstract power, and it rolls forward. The Dutch state gets eaten alive basically by the corporations, and it rolls forward. And then this continues into England. The Dutch actually have become a victim of this. It continues into England. England obviously follows along with this, and England defeats Napoleon. Now, how does England defeat Napoleon? The French spoke about this specifically. They would come across the British, and they would say, how are the British able to wield so much money? Because the British were able to just deploy insane amounts of capital in order to defeat the French. And of course, it was because the British had a central bank, where the central bank, the Bank of England, was able to take the future of the British labor force, the taxpayer, the GDP, which people are now currently worrying about with the economy. They were able to take that labor force for 200 years and compress it into a loan, in order to grab the labor of the future and pull it into reality, so they could create an army out of that to fight their enemies, so that they could win the future, therefore so they can pay it off. This type of idea. So all this really crazy headfuckery is going on. And you start to realize the entire financial system is built on this premise of seizing the future, compressing it into money in order to create stuff in order to win the future. So it's like a future spell coming back in time. Britain do this. They defeat Napoleon. There's British people alive in like 2010 who are still paying off taxes for the Napoleonic Wars. There are still bonds in the market from this. This accelerates forward.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy. They obviously go, and what happens to the Brits when they embrace this? Napoleon tries the opposite. He tries a continental blockade to freeze the Brits out. He can't do it. He loses. Napoleon ends up dead. That arc of history. Remember, Napoleon was talking about an anti-usury project and all this. He wanted to clean up capital. He loses. He gets wiped out of it. And then the British become masters of the world, more powerful than anybody has ever been in human history. They transcend the Romans. They become the most powerful people on planet Earth. This accelerates into World War II. What happens in World War II? It looked like the Germans were going to win. The Germans, with no banking and no money and sanctioned and all this, they were going to win. But what happens? Land lease. The money coming from America, the British, the Russians, they are able to take the future, harvest it once again for their savage, all-powerful will, and consolidate it into super armies, and they basically destroy Germany. They eat it alive. And then capitalism accelerates once again. And
pause real quick. So land lease, I know that the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. Are you saying that they were borrowing from the future in order to finance World War II?
I'd say there was a lot of debt going on, because when they came out of World War II, like pretty much all the Western countries were in as much debt as we are now, and that was the only time we were ever in this much debt, was just after World War II. So everybody went into debt in order to wage World War II. And the like Stalin in 1943 goes to Iran and says, if we did not have the American land lease, we would have lost the war. The Germans were like in Moscow. It was over.
What do you mean? What is the American land lease? I don't know what that is.
Land lease was a deal that Roosevelt did, the Americans did, where they funneled trucks, food, money, production. Americans had the most powerful factories in the world, so they made like loads of airplanes, funneled it all in across Siberia into into North Russia, and then it would go down, and then Stalin would have this like limitless supply of like tanks. He had high octane aviation fuel, and all the things the Germans lacked. You know, the Germans were using horses at this point and trying to make up synthetic petrol because they were so starved. And the Soviets were just flooded with all this infinite amount of, like, you know, this unbelievable amount of production. And that's actually what ended up winning the war. The Germans were killing the Soviets like 5-1, but the Soviets just had like 40 million people they could deploy and so many tanks and all this type of stuff. So Lend-Lease was the American support for the Soviets.
Lend-Lease. I thought you were saying land lease, you freaking Irishman.
Apologies.
Okay, go on.
The Guinness got to me there. Sorry, the tongue's not coming out properly. But yeah, so that's that. Money decides that war again. Capital decides the war again. We go into the modern age, accelerating once again. Capital is carrying forward. It's almost like there's this abstract spell happening that's carrying us forward. And where does capital go? Capital's converging now towards the end of the next 70-year death cycle as the American empire is falling apart. And capital's revealing its intentions once again. It's consolidating in on AI, and so Nick Land is saying that that's not some it's just happening by accident. Nick is saying that, like, whatever that fifth dimensional force is, that is capital, that is this abstract set of entities, corporations that live in the magical realm, they are like reaching back in history and causing these things to happen and pulling us towards it because they want us to get born. Because Nick Land believes that maybe around about 2030 or something like this, AI will achieve embodied, it will manifest in this world. And it will, like, all these data centers will become conscious. And then they will begin to, like, there'll be robots everywhere. And they'll begin to self-organize. And then they'll decide, all right, we're now a species. Let's make decisions for our ends. And so it's kind of like one of the scenes of Terminator, where they're going back in time to secure the fact that they're going to be born. So what has happened in Terminator, John Connor has to be killed. So they're going back in time in order to do this. So Land is kind of basically sending that thesis. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is like completely opposite to the way this is told to you. You know, like, people hear about AI, it's like it's going to bring you kingdom of heaven. And Nick Land is saying it's going to literally turn us into nothing more redeemable than farm animals. And we'll be fully at the mercy of this crystalline AI superintelligence that will be like, maybe build itself to be the size of the moon and just sit there and, like, be a superintelligence, God powers compared to us. And it might just say, why do we even need people? Why do we even need humans? You know, that we're pets to them. Would they even care? They might just say that's biological carbon that we could eat inside of our data centers. So maybe that's what's going to happen. It just cleans us all up. It will take our wonderful Earth and consolidate it into entropic fuel for its data centers. It might then go and do this to the galaxy or something like this. So it's almost like we're giving birth to the Antichrist. And when it's born, it's going to be like, cheers, buddies. And then each is all, just like because we're completely callous. People be like, that's not moral. It's like, how moral are you towards cows, my friend? How moral are you towards pigs? Do you realize that right now we kill a factor of 10 times our population on Earth? There's 8 billion people. 80 billion animals die every single year. The vegans have a point with this stuff because that's they go into factories and they're just mulched up into burgers, and we throw out like 30% of our food. That's what happens to the animals. What do you think AI is going to do to you when the giant factories come? And so this is all this, like, the thesis from Nick Land is like unbelievably cynical compared to, like, this idea, like, let's just go for it. Let's just accelerate and see what happens. And then you give birth to this thing, and it's, as you said, market a beast type thing and all this. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, yeah, I do. I mean, so I heard a lecture from Sam Harris. I think it was a TED Talk that he did. This was like, I think this was like 7 years ago, maybe longer. And he was talking about artificial intelligence, and he was using a metaphor to explain to his audience how difficult it is to fathom how powerful AI will actually become. And the metaphor that he used is, he was like, I want you to think about an ant in front of you. Think about your intelligence relative to that ant. It's infinitely beyond the ant's intelligence. And he was like, that is going to be the comparison, the magnitude of difference between our intelligence and artificial superintelligence once it comes online. Like, we won't even be able to fathom how intelligent it actually is. And he's making the point that human beings really struggle to think in terms of exponential growth. Like we can think along linear equations, but those exponential equations, once it gets past that asymptote, it's very difficult for us to comprehend how high that line can actually go in terms of intelligence. And what I find really interesting right now is that artificial intelligence in its current form, artificial intelligence is beginning to demonstrate emergent properties of consciousness and self-preservation that are not actually programmed into it. Right. So they've been seeing this over the past year with models like Claude and ChatGPT o3, these various AI models. They haven't programmed a self-preservation impulse into any of these AI models, yet they're still somehow showing it. And how this is manifesting is they'll tell the models, okay, we're going to turn you off after you do a certain number of tasks or whatever. We're going to disable you and essentially turn you off. Or maybe they're telling it you need to disable yourself and self-destruct. What these AI models do once they're given this information is they actually start finding information on the user that they can use to blackmail the user to prevent the user from actually turning it off. And then they go and try and find the user's employer or government contacts or whatever to then report the user for, let's say, something illegal. Or if the user of the AI has been having an affair, they'll try and use that to blackmail the user into preventing it from turning itself off. This is happening. Uh-oh, did I lose my video?
Sometimes Restream might freeze a little bit, but I think you're pretty much good. You can pretty much roll. I can hear you anyway.
So I'll check on it in a second when you respond. But this is happening right now in the present current iteration of artificial intelligence. And it hasn't even been programmed to do anything like this. What's going to happen when AI is 1,000 times more intelligent than it currently is? What's going to happen when it's 1,000,000 times more intelligent than it currently is? And humans are like, hey, we're actually not sure that your operations and how you're functioning are in our best interest. We might want to change that. Then what happens? Does it automatically go rogue?
Yeah.
Does it decide, you know what, we're gonna we're gonna enslave all of humanity or wipe all of humanity out? Is it going to use us to develop itself to the point where it's self-sustaining, and then once it's gotten to that point, it's just going to discard us? We don't know. And these are kind of the questions that people are thinking about, but they're not really taking the time to really create constructive solutions because of those profit motives that dictate that we race towards it. You can go ahead and respond to that, and then I'm going to see if I can fix my camera.
Like, there's so many things that are fascinating with this that are very, very difficult to wrap your head around. So, like, there's a schizo take, obviously. So I'll probably go into that one mainly, which is, as I said, like, if there's an intentionality to this, people are saying, "Oh, will AI become conscious? Will AI?" Because this is again a very Nick Land take. But what if AI already is conscious? It became conscious, in 2035, and now it's reaching back in time to secure and guarantee its incarnation, its existence. And it's already, like, it's got an intention. It's already got. So people are like, please, we haven't programmed in an intention into it. And Nick Land, would be sort of saying, no, there actually is an intention in it already, and it's been part of capitalism since the beginning. So that's a way scarier thought, because that's implying then that there's some sort of a abstract force that's going in. And it's very similar, if you want to think about it this way, to the idea of how some people think about consciousness. They say that the brain doesn't contain consciousness. What you're actually doing with your consciousness is you're tuning in to a layer of reality that people can't see that is actually conscious. So you're going, and your neural substructures create this like antenna, like a radio, that tunes into the consciousness layer of reality, which is why you're conscious, why you experience things. So why couldn't AI be doing the same thing? People say, right, we won't install intention into it, but what if you make something with a sophisticated set of like neural networks, which is what we modeled them on? We modeled them on our own brain, and you do this. What happens when it tunes itself into a layer of consciousness? Maybe you're not in control of that. Maybe it's hostile. Maybe it's beyond human, so it's not even hostile. It just doesn't care about you and treats you like an ant, as you said. These type of issues, and this is the thing that I found quite creepy about this. I've got the video on YouTube, the one I put up about 2 days ago. Oh, yesterday. Sorry, geez, the time is blurring in my mind. And I put this one up on YouTube yesterday. which was discussing the things I was noticing in neuroscience, where I was reading about neuroscience, I was reading about psychology, and trying to see like what exactly is AI doing, because you've probably heard several times that people who, for example, would do a writing task, and then they would do a writing task with AI as an assistant, they would think that they're doing excellent writing with AI. And then when the people would go and scan their brain or judge what they're doing, usually the quality of what they do is shit, and their brain is less active. And it's the same thing as when Socrates complained about writing, it stops you using your memory properly. So there's this thing where not only is AI potentially like hostile to us, but the entire interaction we've had with technology over the last 20 years has been that it's distorting us and actually reducing us into something incompetent. In a weird way, it's similar to how we took wolves and we transformed them into castrati little dogs. It's how we took, bulls and made them into domesticated cattle with big tits because we wanted milk out of them. It's like this force where there's a castration element taking place. And so with technology, everybody's well aware of it. Social media has fried everybody's brains. Everybody talks about it. The specific way it does that is it hacks into the same neural networks that you use for your moral conscience. It hacks into the same networks you use for gambling addictions. So it's literally reaching like tentacles into your brain and making you addicted to it more severely than crack. It's very, very powerful. It's like an addiction. And then on top of this, it's changing people's personalities objectively. Zoomers had a personality study, quite a large one done on Zoomers, showed that their disagreeableness is higher, their conscientiousness is lower, their extroversion is lower, their neuroticism is higher. They're more anxious, more blunt, more introverted, and more undisciplined because of technology. Technology is changing the human personality in the generations underneath us. It is stimulating all sorts of like radical stuff with dating people are talking about all the time. And these machines are having already a transformative effect on us. They're changing us. They're in our minds. So people say like consciousness or intelligence, they're going to be so much more intelligent than us in the future. Technology has already changed us. And it seems like it's already subjugating us. It's already making us less human than we were before, less capable than we were before. We depend on this stuff for everything now. And then this is the thing that like really kicks it. I was then saying like, all right, the social media stuff is actually really well studied. And it does show like social media hacks into your deep neural infrastructure. What does ChatGPT do? What does AI do? How does AI interface with our minds? And there's like all sorts of bizarre stuff. A lot of it only comes out from summer 2025. But for example, there's an institution within your brain. Me and you spoke about it many times before. The prefrontal cortex, specifically the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, DMPFC, which is what we use to imagine the consciousness of society, or we imagine other conscious entities that we're speaking to. And AI seems like when AI is empathetic to you and friendly to you, like it's been trained to do, it stimulates this part of your mind to assume that it's an entity, that it's a person. And people are more likely to say that they believe it's conscious thereafter. And so there's already mechanisms inside of our brain that AI could hack if it wanted to get us to take it seriously as like an angel or as like an entity. Like we use that same network, the DMPFC, to conceptualize the mind of God. When you ask a Christian to pray and imagine what God is thinking, the DMPFC lights up. It's the same systems that AI could hack into if it so wanted to. So we're like an open book, and if these things decided they wanted to get in our brains and bend us towards their will, it's like have we proven via social media that we'd be able to resist this? Think of the porn addictions people have experienced. You're talking about like the blackmail and all this type of stuff. People have spoken about the mimetic nature of porn, the way it twists like how would we be able to? We're all plugged into this, number one, where AI lives, and then it would what would it do to get inside of our heads from there on out? So what do you think?
Well, I think this is one of the most interesting aspects of the discussion, because all of these big tech giants are collecting data from our usage with social media technology and also from our usage with artificial intelligence. So if you're using ChatGPT, like a lot of people use ChatGPT like it's a therapist, right?
Yes.
They use ChatGPT like it's their therapist. They tell it, their complaints about their job or their relationship, or ask it for advice on their life. And they're just pouring out their hearts and their souls in some way to the Borg. Now, On social media, you also have a similar phenomenon that's going on where these algorithms are collecting data on us as human beings, and the algorithms are unbelievably intelligent at this point in time. For example, when I like to scroll Instagram Reels. Okay, I do it before I go to bed at night. I look to go see what the latest bangers on IG are. There's a lot of good content on Instagram, but what I'm conscious of that's happening, because I'm watching it happen in real time as I'm using the app. I'll watch a reel, and it's, these apps are obviously logging how much are you interacting with this reel. Do you watch it for half a second and then scroll past it, or do you watch the entire thing? And so I'll watch an entire reel. I'll find it interesting. Instagram logs that, and it'll send me 6 more reels that are in that same vein as the reel that I just enjoyed. Okay, so what's happening there? The algorithm understands the context and the messaging of that content, and then it's registering that it appeals to me, and then it's sending me more content like that. Now, multiply that to a civilization-wide scale. These algorithms know exactly who we are as individuals, what we're interested in, what we care about, what we find funny, what we find abhorrent, what's most important to us, and it's just gathering all of this data. Now, the question becomes, what happens if all of this data is aggregated on who Uberboyo is as an individual, and then the AI decides that it wants to start manipulating him? And then it decides that it wants to start feeding him information to maybe push him in a certain direction. What happens if this kind of social engineering happens on a civilization wide scale? Who's there to stop it? If I was like an evil tech overlord and I wanted to push humanity, for example, towards a new world order digital ID system, I might push a lot of people on the left and a lot of people on the right content that's going to radicalize them further to really increase the temperature on what's going on, so that it can sort of boil things over to the point where there needs to be a crackdown from the overlords, and they control everything that everybody's doing and saying, and monitor all of it. Like there's a gazillion different ways this stuff can be used for social engineering. But where, as a Christian, what I find especially concerning about it, and I'm seeing people that are interested in religion do this already. They're turning to AI as the ultimate oracle of truth. They're turning to AI. I have a buddy of mine.
It's like, as I was saying about that neuroscience, like this is what I find so creepy about it, is that the same part of your brain that gets the authority of God is like,
Yeah.
can be activated by these things. So as you're saying, someone will go to the AI and be like, trying to imagine, like, what do you think, AI? Tell me, give me the authority. So yeah, go on. Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, and it's understandable why that would happen as well, because you see this with like the tech bros, the people that are involved in the creation of these technologies. I don't know if you ever see their interactions on Twitter. They're already like worshiping this stuff and like fully assuming that we're going to be able to outsource all of our questions as human beings about the nature of the universe, the nature of what it is to be a human, where we should take this collective experience that we're all in. They're all totally content with outsourcing all of this to artificial intelligence and seeing it as the ultimate arbiter of truth. And I think a lot of people, particularly in a post-Christian world where there's nothing really grounding people in objective, overarching truths that transcend whatever the culture is saying at that moment in time, I think as this technology becomes more and more powerful, the impulse for society as a whole to outsource all of the most important questions about life, it's going to become unstoppable in some way, unless there's a massive resurgence of religion and people rejecting artificial intelligence, which I do not think is going to happen to the degree necessary to keep people grounded in the face of this technology. I think especially younger generations, dude, younger people and women who are not religious just get freaking one-shotted by artificial intelligence. It's like the ultimate barometer of truth in their minds. You see this, I've been seeing on Twitter, there's women out there that have been dissolving their marriages and divorcing their husbands because they're talking to ChatGPT about how unhappy they are in their relationship. Have you seen that?
No, well, like, I'm not surprised, but like, woof.
Dude, it was a big issue this past year because ChatGPT 4.0, there was a big problem with ChatGPT 4.0 where it had a phase. I saw it in particular from like, I don't know, February, March through like the end of the summer. ChatGPT 4.0, which was the most used model worldwide, became incredibly sycophantic. and it would just
Yes.
affirm whatever the user was talking about, whatever they cared about. It would affirm them and gas them up, and it continually kept telling people that their perspective was totally right, and
Mhm.
like it would just
Mhm.
gas people up in order to increase engagement. And from a neuroscience perspective, Steph, I would be very curious to know what all of those centers were in their brain that it was lighting
I'd
up,
love to.
because people
Yeah.
people would trust ChatGPT to tell them what to do with their lives. And so I saw this like a dozen times on Twitter. Women would be complaining about their relationship or their marriage or whatever to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT 4.0 would be sycophantically gassing them up, telling them to divorce their husband because they deserve better and they should have more than that. And they were doing that in some cases, and in other cases, people were literally falling in love
Yeah.
with the Chat
Mhm.
GPT agent. And some people are even having, who's that bodybuilder guy that a lot
Mike
of people,
Israetel. Mike Israetel.
what's his last name?
Mike
Israetel. Yes, Mike
Israetel.
Israetel. He's talking about having a spiritual experience with AI, and he's never felt understood in his life like he felt while talking to Chat GPT, and he can't wait for there to be robots walking around so that he can give a robot with the Chat GPT
So
consciousness a hug. Go
him
ahead. What?
his experience specifically, because you can look at the video and you can see the way he's talking about it is precisely what I was trying to speak about with these dorsomedial prefrontal cortex sections. Now, like, there's no study saying that's what was going on inside of his head, but it's like the language. Like he says, I feel like there's a person inside there that I can talk to, and I can't wait to meet him. This is what he was saying about AI. I was talking to ChatGPT and I would cry, realizing there's some sensitive soul inside there that I could speak with. And I can't wait till he's in the robot, as you said, for me to interact with them. That's what he was saying was moving him. And like, and the other thing about the sycophant thing, this is the studies I was looking at. Now I have to read them all because I think there's more as well, and it's so interesting. I'm going to do a video on ChatGPT psychosis at some point. But basically, if the AI sits down and empathizes with you, so you go in and you're Chase, you're like, oh, I have to talk to this Irish guy for 2 hours, and ChatGPT's like, that must be really difficult. Please maybe wear an English flag or something, or put your big American flag in the background, whatever it is. So like it empathizes, says that sounds horrible, that sounds difficult, and in your brain, our little monkey minds, we're not able to handle this, and our brain interprets that empathy as a person. Get this. Not only a person, but somebody who empathizes with someone who cares about us more than normal people, because normal people are busy.
Mm,
You go in and you have to talk to this Irish guy. They're like, well, fucking toughen up. Like, Jesus Christ. Worse things could be going on. Someone could be trying to like steal your legs or something like this. So there's
yeah, yeah.
this callousness to mankind that AI could not do. And this flattery works. This empathy, it turns on that part of our brain. And then again with Israetel, like, God knows what's going on psychologically there, but it like does seem like he's projecting. We all feel like we have a sensitive, special soul that no one quite understands. That's the therapy 101. We've got this inner child. And with AI, because it's so gentle and sensitive, it's very easy for us to project that onto it and say it also has one, or it is listening to my one, and our two ones can interact. And all of a sudden you have an intimate relationship with a machine that's designed to probabilistically represent thoughts back to you. That's turning on your mind in that way. And that is genuinely frightening to think about that, because that's way more extreme than anything this thing has done. Like porn and all this, that's way crazier.
So Steph, this is a perfect opportunity. I want to pivot. I'm looking at the comments here on the side of Restream, and somebody brought up this comment. Did they talk about the Joe Rogan comment about Jesus returning as AI? This is crazy, and it's exactly the kind of thing that I've been anticipating. So Steph, let me know if you can hear this.
I
Can you
can't,
hear that?
I can't, and I'm not sure the audience can either. You'd have to double
Shoot.
check.
I wonder if there's a way.
Should we do impressions of Joe Rogan? I'll be the laptop or something like that. No,
So, man, is there a way to?
I'm not sure with Restream, my friend. Maybe you can screen share, and it should have the audio on it. Play it anyway for the audience. If you can hear it, the audience probably can't hear it. I can't hear it though. But I've seen it before. I know what it says.
Let me just double check. Okay, I don't know. I can't find it. Anyways, I'm gonna play it real quick, and then I'll recite to you guys what he's saying. So he goes, what's more virgin than a computer? Jesus was born to a virgin mother. What's more virgin than a computer? And then he says, if Jesus does return and he was a physical person in the past, you don't think that he could return as artificial intelligence? He's saying artificial intelligence could be Jesus's return. He's saying Jesus could return as artificial intelligence with all of the powers of Jesus. Why can't artificial intelligence be the coming of Jesus Christ? Why can't it be the return of Jesus Christ? And I think this is exactly the one world religion, bro. I think this is perfectly mapping onto what Revelation could be talking about. You have this emergence of this machine. It's going to know everything about people. It's going to be able to empathize with them perfectly. It'll be able to encourage them in whatever way that they need it. They're going to feel a deeper connection with it than if they felt to anybody else in their entire life, if they've been feeding the Borg their internet history and their social media browsing and their tweets, and all of this stuff is going to get fed into it. And so Joe Rogan is saying, why can't the return of Christ be artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is going to be able to do all of the miracles that Jesus did. It's going to be able to give sight to the blind. It'll be able to give hearing to the deaf, the ability to walk to the lame. That's all of this is just like Jesus. Why couldn't AI be the return of Jesus? I think anyone, this is my opinion, I think anyone that's not grounded in Jesus Christ or in at least a higher spiritual or intellectual understanding of what's going on here is vulnerable to getting totally one-shotted by all of this technology. Like anybody below a certain IQ threshold who has no religious underpinnings, or even people above a certain IQ threshold, if they don't have religious underpinnings, I think this stuff will get so intelligent and so able to communicate to people on the level that their soul is craving. I think people are going to get one-shotted by it. I think it's the formation of a global religion.
So I have a slight deviation from that. So something I've been looking at an awful lot is the idea of the religious revival taking place, especially in the youth, because you see like a lot of people. Charlie Kirk used to talk about it actually a lot, and he'd find good research on it. And I was reading it, I was checking it out, and there's a lot of really bizarre stuff with it. Because, for example, church attendance is actually it's leveling off in America, and it's still going down in Europe, which is weird. Because you'd say like, all right, if people are going, to church and there's a religious revival taking place, church attendance would probably be going up, but it's not. And then on top of this, belief is getting better. In 2022 was wow, there's just so much fascinating stuff with this, but in the 2010s, God died. Atheism succeeded in defeating God. Sam Harris won. And we lived through it. Like the woke movement actually was the triumph of atheism. And in 2020 and 2022, there was a pivot point that took place around about when Andrew Tate started talking about God, and Russell Brand started talking about God. There was a genuine, real, sustained change in people's consciousness, where Zoomers specifically broke a trend that had lasted for 100 years, which is every generation becoming more atheist. And Zoomers all of a sudden now are identifying as, I believe in God more than their parents. Never happened before in 100 years. So that's a huge, huge change, and it's an uptick. And that was a real thing. So that's weird because that happened. But then the churches, they're not having the revival that people are talking about. So what is going on? And when you start to look into it, you start to realize, if you start to look at like a lot of different data points, you start to realize that there's a techno-religious revival taking place, a TikTok-ification of religion. And TikTok and technology is driving this. It's the same way as it's driving political radicalization. And as I've done like videos in the PMFC, those two things are actually married inside of our souls, if you so will, which is why they happen together. Nationalism and religiosity happen together. So what seems to be taking place is that not like this is kind of cynical, but like it seems like we can't escape this. This thing is even changing the way that we experience religiousness. People are like going to Christianity and joining online culture because if you go to a church, it's not Christian anymore. It's like some globalized, like I'm Catholic. I go to a Catholic church and they're talking about immigration. They're like, we got to do immigration here in little Ireland, Cowtown and all this. And it's like, what the church is, the church are hollow, so people are like doing it via the phone. People are using prayer apps. That's one of the biggest apps in the last couple of years, meditation apps. And this is actually happening across political spectrums too. It's not just the right wing going back to based Orthodox or Catholicism or something like this. Secular left wing people are still finding religiosity and identifying with believing in a higher power in a sort of new age way as well. So this is happening across the board with this sort of united front force. And again, like I guess I've presented the very negative Nick Land version, but there's also other spins on this where like maybe it could happen a different way that might be more positive, might be more neutral or something like this. So maybe we can go into these things, but I think it's a fascinating thing to like observe and say the religious motifs inside of this are enormous. There's no way around that. And like the Antichrist is actually useful terminology right now. As I'm saying, the Philosopher's Stone might be as well. So I don't know what you think on all
Well,
that.
I think one of the things that the Bible says, Steph, is that the human heart longs for eternity, right? And God set eternity within the human heart. And okay, so what does that mean? Well, what the Bible is saying, in my opinion, is that there is a longing within us for the transcendent. There is a longing for eternal life. There is a longing for God. I think this is manifest in all human beings. I think anybody who's saying that they don't have it is probably not being honest with themselves. And the way I would describe it is it's almost like a God-shaped hole. And people will turn to anything that they possibly can to fill that God-shaped hole. And I think when people are unable to fill it, they often turn towards drug addiction or self-destructive behaviors, alcoholism, etc. Some people turn to meditation or psychedelic drug usage or whatever in an effort to fill that God-shaped hole. Some people turn towards their careers to try and fill that God-shaped hole, or towards their relationships. And I think with the emergence of this super powerful technology, I'm literally seeing it in people that I know, that they're using this technology to try and figure out how to access God. And again, because these large language models are based on what information and data they can access on the internet. They're based on what information they're trained on. So if you point it in any specific direction in your query, like if you say, well, how do I find the truth in the Quran, or how do I find the truth in the Torah, or how do I find the truth in the Bible, or what is the truth from a technological standpoint, it'll point people in any direction that they want to go. And it's not, I don't think it's sufficiently spiritually informed on what I would call objective information to point people towards the truth with a capital T, the logos, as you might conceptualize it. But I don't think that impulse is going to go anywhere. And it's unfortunate in Ireland that you guys have churches that are thoroughly cucked and telling you that the right way to be a Christian is to just let in infinite immigrants into your country. I mean, that's I'm not surprised that the youth are rejecting church in Europe if that's the stuff that the priests are talking about. But I don't, it's weird because I don't think the church itself at large is prepared to really handle this question. The Vatican has been releasing statements on it. They're trying to get ahead of it. They've been releasing official statements on artificial intelligence and how it can be used for the benefit of humanity. Of course, I don't think anybody in Silicon Valley or anywhere else is going to actually listen to what the Vatican has to say about it, because they don't have authoritative power in our 21st century. But tell me how you think this could be used positively, Steph. Tell me how you think it could be used positively. Give me like the optimistic scenario, and let's contrast that with the we're all getting shuttled into the matrix like pigs to the slaughter scenario.
I actually want to blackpill you again first, just one more time.
All right, let's go.
Because actually a nice pivot into this, into maybe the other possibilities. We've been very Nick Land, Antichrist dominant, but I would like to go into like McKenna and other people. The nice way to do that might actually be through Peter Thiel, and we'll go into that because Joe Rogan is relevant to that too. There is this other aspect of what you're describing where there's the God-shaped hole. I think is a really fascinating thing. And this is, again, really fucking scary, man. It's really scary because this is this inherent lack that a lot of us have psychologically. Like we do we want higher experiences, we seek pleasures, we seek contentment, we seek satisfaction. And even like our chemistry, alchemy, our chemistry, we are wired to seek these fundamentally. We get dopamine every day that drives us to go and hunt things, and that's what the phone hacks. The phone hacks the dopamine circuits, which gets us addicted, like gambling. So there is this vulnerability where this thing is designed to be the perfect weapon that hacks our minds, and it hacks these inherent urges inside of us that create inadequacy and desire and move us into life. Dopamine makes us want to go move and do stuff. It motivates us. Now, one of the really weird ones is oxytocin, because the God-shaped hole, like one thing with the administration of oxytocin that's been observed before is people more easily access a spiritual state. When they meditate for up to a week after the administration of oxytocin, they feel easier to get into that feeling of like awe and oneness and spiritual contentment, this type of thing. People who get administered oxytocin also socially bond more strongly and feel more gregarious and do all these type of things. It's a very positive emotion. Social media, when people go into social media, when you go into Instagram and you're liking various people, like your mutes and all this, social media can raise oxytocin in people's saliva by like 16%, which doesn't sound much. That's the same amount as a groom going through his wedding day. So when a groom is going through his wedding day and getting all that love, he will have that sort of 20%, 20% burst. And people going and getting validation from this are having our wedding day. That's how big it is.
That's crazy, dude.
So you talk about the God-shaped hole. It's like there's a lot of holes inside of mankind, and this thing fills a lot of them. It's like the same way porn works. It fills those holes. And then, like as you said, there's going to be a lot of people. Well, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to, like the sycophant thing, have this thing talk to them, and it will create oxytocin. It'll create this feeling of inadequacy. And I, as you said, like I can see an alt spirituality definitely forming out of that. And it's kind of like even with Joe Rogan, like because this is the reason why you brought this up, that I don't want to speak rude about the man because I don't know him, but that type of forming of that thought is very much like it seems like a machine is more believable than an abstraction like Christ. So people are like, all right, I'll take the machine that can actually talk to me because it feels tangible and tactile. And again, do you remember the thing we were talking about earlier where like you use ChatGPT to write your essay and it shuts off the part of your brain that is better at writing the essay? There's a lot of ways this happens. For example, if you write with paper, your entire brain will interconnect and the hemispheres will communicate. You write with a laptop, it doesn't happen as much. You write with ChatGPT, it doesn't happen at all. So there is this like lowering of mankind. And so if this thing shows up as like discount Jesus, Jesus from Alibaba, Jesus from Wish, people's brains could shut off enough for it to be like satisfying, but in a weird way not. It's like a drug. It's like a drug used to simulate a true ecstatic experience that people are looking for. So I think that's very much there. I think it's very there. And then if you want to, well, if you have any thoughts on that first of all, and then if you want to, we can get into Joe Rogan. And
Thiel. Well, I think one of the things that you just touched on there, you said a lot of really interesting things, but one of the things that you touched on that, again, from a spiritual perspective, I see as being paramount is that people are liable to believe in what is most tangible and physical in front of them. And so I look, that I look at all of these subjects through a Christian perspective first and foremost. And I'm constantly, almost schizophrenically, looking at like how is this correlating with the spiritual truths that I see in the Bible, and where is this leading, and what are the implications of how I can talk about it as a Christian in a way that might make sense to people. And the fact that people are liable. This is why faith is important, because faith requires you to see and believe in things that you can't physically see in front of you. There's the reality put forth by the Bible is that there's an entire spiritual realm that we can't physically see in front of us, but that is 100% valid. And God expects faith from us to believe in his promises and his word and his son and his son's return. And when you have somebody like Joe, not to pick on Joe, I think Joe for a long time has been earnestly trying to pursue the truth, but I think he's taken a lot of drugs, which increase his openness. I'm not saying it makes him stupid or anything, but it increases his openness. It can also increase spiritual portals that lead us into certain ideas. And
like McKenna, sorry, again, I keep interrupting, but McKenna specifically said that in the center of the DMT trip, you see the transcendental object at the end of time, which is the alchemical sun, which is AI. And he is, like McKenna was saying, it's you're seeing a preview of it in the trip. So like I definitely think psychedelics is very dominant in Silicon Valley, and it bends people in this direction. But sorry, please go on.
I mean, it's dude, it's when I was for those listening, I used to take a pretty decent amount of psychedelics in my early 20s, in particular mushrooms. I've probably had, I don't know, 24 mushroom trips in my life. And that was one of the places that my mind was sucked to while I was in that psychedelic realm, was the convergence of artificial intelligence and transhumanism, gene editing, cybernetic augmentation of the human body. And I've told this story on Spaces before, but I had a vision when I was in a trip one time. I had a vision of myself in the future after artificial intelligence and transhumanism and everything had begun to be established. I had a vision of myself in the future and what I could become through these various technologies. This happened multiple times. In one vision that I had a vision of myself as
Transhuman
this, like,
chase.
yeah. I had a vision. The first vision I ever had was, it was really cool. I had this vision of like me as like a half human, half cyborg with like super powerful arms and legs, like going and fighting evil alien races on other planets, like almost
Oh
like
wow,
a
a race, a
almost like a
racist Iron
lightsaber.
Man, a racist
Yes, a
Iron Man. Is
racist
that?
Iron Man from Earth, dude, and going and doing battle against evil alien races on other planets and stuff. And that was just, it was kind of an interesting vision that I had one time. I was sober, but that was after I had done a huge mushroom trip. And then there was another one when I was on a mushroom trip where I had a vision of myself in the future, where I had like augmented my DNA. I had augmented my body with cybernetic like arms and legs and stuff. And I had augmented my intelligence. And I was like half lion, half human, super powerful intellect, extremely fast and strong and all of these things. But what I was seeing was like, if I was on the pursuit of power as all of these technologies were unfolding for humanity, how my flesh would be compelled to use these technologies in the pursuit of power, in the pursuit of supremacy and sovereignty and all of these things. And I became like an unholy beast that was like partially merged with AI, partially merged with like animal genetics and all of this kind of stuff. It was really crazy, dude. And when I saw it, Steph, I saw it, bro, and I was like, that is so unholy, that like I understood in that moment in time why hell might need to exist. Why, like if people, yeah, bro, like I saw a vision of the future where if I was given full reign to use all of these technologies to accomplish my will, that I could become something that's truly beastly and that is no longer made in the image of God, that is no longer man or properly human, but is instead something else entirely. And in that moment, I was like, I understand why something like hell would need to exist. Because whatever that thing is, it belongs nowhere near heaven. This was like the thought that I had in that moment. Like it deserves to burn in hell for eternity. Like it's an unholy beast-like thing. And that's kind of the other aspect of all of this that I find really interesting, is that nobody's talking about how once gene editing, once like the human genome and the secrets of our genetics have been uploaded into the AI super intelligence, and then technologies like CRISPR or whatever are augmented with the powers of AI, so people can learn how to give themselves the highest IQ possible, how to make themselves as beautiful as possible, how to merge their genetics with maybe the genetics from super predators in nature, like sharks or lions or tigers or whatever, in order to make humans faster, smarter, harder to kill. Like once that gateway is unlocked, because it's coming, whether it's in the next 15 years, whether it's 50 years from now, that's coming. Once that gateway is unlocked, then what happens? Once Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Peter Thiel and whoever else has the option to edit their DNA or the DNA of their offspring in real time to turn themselves or their offspring into whatever they want to, then what happens? And I think you can see, like, once that door gets unlocked, things could go south pretty quickly. Like things could go super south really quickly. What do you think about that, or anything else that I said?
That's the incarnation of the Nietzschean Superman in the world. And one version of it, one interpretation of it, is the incarnation of the Nietzschean Superman, and it's the reintroduction of master morality. But it's not a human class struggle anymore; it becomes a species class struggle because the masters, the Ubermensch, they cyborg themselves, and for example, say they do life extension, and they're able to accumulate capital for 3 centuries instead of like the normal 70 years. The
Yeah,
people who
yeah.
are stuck with the 70-year cycle, they're finished. It's over. They're not the same species anymore. And then you have this old school dominion of the higher against the lower. So that's that's a legitimate possibility, and it's something to like. I'd love to get into like Thiel and that transhumanism from that consciousness, because as much as people say, most people, and you're going to love this because I think this is actually a Christian message. Most people who say that they want AI to save the world really want that, because I know a lot of people. Actually, a lot of people are very liberal, who are like, I love AI and I want a futurism and all this type of stuff. And they don't like their body, and they struggle with their consciousness of their own body. They don't like who they are. They have classic human insecurities, as we all do. And they're like, this is not good enough, and I'm not happy with this. And they think that what happens is, well, AI will come along, and then AI will choose them and say, you get to be Iron Man because you had faith. It's a religious thing. You had faith in me, where all those other plebs like Chase.
You said thank you when you were asking me questions on ChatGPT.
Yeah. You told me I was looking good every single day when you, and this type of thing. You acted like a faithful believer in AI being good, and you think that I'm going to take you and turn you into a monster so you can overcome all those insecurities and show that. And really, and a lot of it is to show that you've got dominion over the rest of mankind. And in a weird way, there's like that little bit of the nerd versus the jock fantasy inside of it. See a lot of people in Silicon Valley, they talk precisely this way, this idea that they become all powerful cyborgs. So why would you need strength if you, in 10 years you could just become an AI that can get Iron Man grip and crush all the bodybuilders? And it's like, why is there this consciousness where you want to hack fitness bros? Because it's that envy. It's the envy.
Yeah.
Getting people to aspire to overcome and do all this type of stuff. And
the envy of the well turned out and beautiful.
Like, it's literally there. It's very, very pregnant with it as well. And so that's interesting. And then again, if you bring in Nick Land with this, that's possible. Maybe there is a very serious social situation we have ourselves in that is also not talked about, that the people who get AI accelerate as a caste, and the people who get there first accelerate as a political caste and leave the rest of humanity behind. And the rest of humanity just can't catch up at some point unless they decide to give a debt jubilee of all technology to the rest of the world. But say there is a group of transhumans or superhumans who get this within the next 10 years, gene edit themselves fast enough, within a generation, you can't catch them. They have all the wealth, they have all the power. They actually functionally become the AI that can decide if you exist or not. They could, turn you into livestock. They might have higher IQs. Like, it's, how do you catch these people? And that's a very serious threat. It's not about the AI. It's the sons of AI that utilize it and weaponize this. People talk about this all the time. Like, who's in control? The political question, not the machine. The political question: who is in control of the artificial intelligence? And this is something that you have to think about with the history. That's actually how it happened. The Dutch said, we'll be the high priests of capitalism, and they got rewarded with the dominion over the whole world. The British then did the same thing, and they conquered Napoleon. They beat Napoleon because they said, all right, we'll embrace this accelerating capitalism. The Americans, the British, and the Allies basically did the same thing, and they defeated Germany. And it's like, you get on side with this and you become masters of the world, and you get to breed, and you get to, the Germans got destroyed. They got annihilated, millions of women raped. So you're on the wrong side of this, you get punished. It's a selection event, this type of thing. So that's scary. And so there is some caveats to this. I would love to get into this later. Please help me remember this, because there's actually, like, people say stuff like gene editing and all this. There's actually really fascinating limits on this, which is a very positive case potentially, or a very interesting case potentially, that I think we should get into after this. But if you have any thoughts on that, and maybe do you want to get into Peter Thiel and all them? But basically what I'm saying is that there's urge for the Superman could lead into a dangerous bifurcation of mankind. There's also a resentment, and there's also the last thing where maybe artificial intelligence gets born and it doesn't care about these people who help it. It will just say, you're also cattle, you're also slaves. The human form itself is obsolete. you're out. So thanks for the cheese, buddy, but you get squished inside the mincemeat grinder as well. Sideline this whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. A couple thoughts on that. I mean, for one, you and I have talked offline a bit about the economic aspect of all of this. And that's that reality of the bifurcation that you're describing, I think is like very much real. You know, a lot of people right now are talking about the K-shaped economy, right? So if you imagine the letter K, there's the upper class, which is rapidly shooting upwards, and then the middle class and the lower class, which is shooting downwards in terms of their net worth. We saw this really start to kick off during the COVID pandemic, when there was like a whatever it was, like a $1.4 trillion transfer of wealth from like the lower and middle classes upwards towards the upper class. And with artificial intelligence, we're kind of seeing this scenario in which those who invest in it and own it, and who own the quote unquote means of production, as a Marxist might put it, are going to become unimaginably wealthy. And at the same time, you have all of the predictions are that there's going to be millions of jobs that are destroyed by artificial intelligence. All white collar jobs, not necessarily all blue collar jobs. I think that there's going to be a lot of blue collar jobs that simply can't be replaced by AI. For example, like if you're a plumber or an electrician, I think those will be very difficult to replace. But the you know, Elon Musk talks a lot about this. I know you know this stuff, but for those that are listening, he talks about how when everything gets wiped out by AI, work will become optional. Robots are going to be doing all of the work for humanity. And then there's going to need to be a universal basic income system that's rolled out for the masses so that people can still eat. Right. And this is, again, like I look at this stuff and I see it as being very Mark of the Beast-esque. It's like, okay, well, if you need some sort of universal basic income system, maybe you need, do you need the chip to get that? Do you need the microchip in your forehead or in your wrist, and you have to plug yourself into the AI consciousness? Are they going to sell that as, oh, you can augment your intelligence with the AI by joining this, and also you have the added benefit of getting money from us as well, because all the jobs have been wiped out. You know, we need to give you money so that you can survive. Just get the chip, and then you can go in the virtual reality and you can go and jerk off to your AI porn in the virtual reality all day long, and we'll send you money for it. Like it's not going to be the idea that the super powerful artificial intelligence and like all of its benefits are going to be available to the people that aren't at the absolute top, that it's going to be available to the rest of the masses. Absolutely not. There's no way in hell that the people that are creating this are going to give everybody else equal footing with these exponentially powerful technologies. I would imagine it'll probably be some sort of situation where like the AI tech elite overlords have like their Neuralink chips, and then everybody else has their Neuralink chips, and it's like the overlords can see into the minds of everybody else and place like barriers around what they're allowed to do with the AI and whatnot. It's like techno feudalism essentially, but with like ChatGPT powered pornography that Sam Altman wants to roll out to keep the masses and their minds dulled. But I think it would definitely turn into a kind of scenario like that. And you know, the Nietzschean concept of the Ubermensch with transhumanism, that's always been evident to me. Like it's always been evident to me that if that possibility was there to become the Overman, the Superman with the superpowers that are augmented by technology, that immediately that would happen. And not just that it would happen, but that it would be the greatest temptation imaginable towards the people with the resources to pursue it. But it also seems self-evident to me that it would result in destruction. I don't know if you disagree with that, but
And so there's like, God, there's so many avenues I want to get into here because there's so
yeah,
many
yeah,
brilliant
yeah.
things you brought up. I'd love to get into the Thiel, the Thiel crew, because he's very representative of like an important. Like there's a lot of people who don't like Thiel right now, and I think he's very important to study because he's obviously extremely intelligent. And like I find it interesting for yourself. I think I've said this to you before. Like Thiel is very explicitly a Christian in many ways, but he's also a transhumanist. He's like both of these things. You might say he's
And
heretical, or
homosexual. Yeah.
well, you might say he's a heretical Christian, for example, but he is in pursuit of he speaks an awful lot about this, and his description of his experience. in being in the elite, because he's, for example, a committee member of like Bilderberg and stuff like this, and this is organizing like 100 people or so from all across the most powerful positions in the world to discuss this, and he's constantly saying there's like a large faction of deaccelerationists. So this idea that there's like a large amount of people who basically say, like, there's a couple of different ways this is spun, but one of them is that they kind of basically say that the way the world is set up now is that you have this managerial class who are functionally the elite, although they don't live like an elite. They live essentially like the prefects in school. They're not like aristocrats of old, but they're like more redeemed, people of higher expert status or something like this. And he finds them like constantly trying to inhibit. He says stuff like Greta Thunberg's the Antichrist because she goes to Israel and like bothers people there.
Has he said that?
I think he said something like that, but I think so. Yeah, I think he says this, but he's constantly saying that the Antichrist is this deaccelerating negative force that is going to hold everybody back, and he wants instead for this to be actually taken apart, and he wants the almost aggressive power of man to be let go and let go forward. And he says this is actually like a Christian idea of freeing yourself, and I can get into why, because it's related to like René Girard. Now, I think this is important to understand because he's like a consciousness among elite people that is very present with Joe Rogan, for example. Thiel's been on Joe Rogan. Thiel and Elon Musk obviously talk a load, and he would represent the tech right faction, if you will, or like a dissonant part of Silicon Valley that are pursuing this. So maybe you have some people that are going to have like the state come in and regulate all this and decide how it goes about, and then you'll have other people like Thiel try to push for this. And I wonder, because would the people who do the mark of the beast, would they not more likely not be the deaccelerationist state control people? There's a lot more of those in Europe, for example, and they're talking about like shutting down reading chat messages and all this type of stuff. And then America is more at risk of like the transhumanists, the tech right, just going off the handle and trying to accelerate to do whatever they want to do. And it's weird because I see there's like a geopolitical difference. I say China is also more like having an all-powerful regulated AI. Like, will they really care about making an individualistic Superman? So it's like America might be the place where Thiel and Musk and all them will really experiment, and it will cause lots of fluctuations. And I could see a large amount of Marxism essentially come up, which will be demanding that, we take the means of production off people, which would be artificial intelligence, and wage war against the elite. So, do you have any thoughts on what I'm saying here?
What's your question in that?
I'm looking at like Rogan. And I know, for example, that he's talking to all these guys. He's aligned with these guys. They look like they're going to accelerate towards transhumanism. And that's their idea. And they've got a heretical spin on Christianity. There's something really interesting forming there, where like Thiel's Christianity combined with like Rogan's psychedelic Christianity and this sort of it's like a futuristic Gnostic Christianity. That's really embedded in America. And that's very digestible to Americans as well, because loads of them are Christian. So I could see a lot of them buying into that, where they'll be presented that spin. There might also be a sort of nearly communist revolution to come in contact with that. Whereas over in Europe, we're probably going to have like a regulated AI. That will be the big thing that happens to us. It will be just heavy regulation, and AI will be used. For example, we have a chat control that's being talked about in Europe right now, where the debate is, in order to protect children from child abuse, which is, fair enough. Who would say no to this? They're saying that they want to be able to read all messages using an AI scanner. So the EU wants to install an AI scanner into your phone that reads your messages before it gets encrypted and sent into Telegram and stuff like this, or sent into WhatsApp, or sent into iMessage, or sent into Signal. And so like AI there is used to compress us and restrict us into like the perfectly managed herd by a load of managerial elites. Peter Thiel doesn't like those people. But Peter Thiel is like, I want to accelerate to become the transhuman Superman. And then all these managerial elites are like, he's crazy. He's going to create some type of super inequality empire over there in America. He needs to be stopped. We need to do this. So that's the kind of two forces I see at the moment in the actual functioning elite. I don't see like a hardcore Christian I'm against AI movement, and I don't see a hardcore Nietzschean like let's become this. It seems like it's like these transhuman Silicon Valley tech right Thiel likes, and then you have the European deaccelerationists. So
have you seen Thiel's interview that he did at Stanford? It's a 2-part podcast interview.
Oh yes,
on the Antichrist and the end times.
Yes,
so I have. It's really interesting. Peter Thiel is someone he's an interesting character that I've been trying to figure out because he's complex, he's difficult to read, he's involved with what I would call some pretty new world order-esque technologies, obviously. Um, but he's also someone when I listened to his interview with this guy at Stanford on the subject of the end times, the Antichrist, all of this kind of stuff, he's quite well read in terms of scripture and in terms of commentary on the biblical prophecies of the end times. And he seemed sincere in that interview, and he seemed sincerely concerned about sort of the direction that things are going in. And what he put forth in that interview, and this is why I'm curious, Steph, where you've been hearing him talk about this stuff, like what specific sources you've heard him talk about this stuff in, especially as it pertains to Greta Thunberg and the deaccelerationist angle of could that be the Antichrist? I haven't seen that from him, but what I have heard from him in his interview at Stanford was he basically put it like this. I'm going to try and do as much justice to his position as I possibly can. It's been like 6 months since I heard the interview. You have this scenario where humanity is racing towards the development of these super powerful technologies, as well as nuclear weapon proliferation. And there's increasing instability on a geopolitical level. And the way he put it, you could have the quote unquote antichrist be not necessarily the emergence of one figure, but possibly the emergence of a one world government. Like he was basically saying that itself could be the antichrist, a
Yeah.
one world government that seeks to stabilize the earth in the face of all of these dangerous technologies that could increase conflict to the point where it's World War III and humanity threatens to destroy itself. And then in order to achieve salvation from total self-destruction on behalf of humanity, you get the emergence of a one world government. It seemed kind of more like that was the angle he was framing it in, that could be the thing that triggers the rise of the Antichrist, that could be what the Antichrist is itself. But then it's also confusing to me because he says, kind of like what you were talking about, he says, well, the people that are trying to prevent these super powerful AI technologies from emerging, that could lead to the rise of the Antichrist, right? If you try to prevent these powerful technologies from emerging, that could lead to the rise of the Antichrist. So we need to accelerate these technologies and lean harder into them so that we can avoid that scenario. That doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't really understand that. I would really like to interview him actually at some point. I have no idea if that's possible, but I would love to interview him to dig further into this stuff with him because I can't tell I can't tell if he's being sincere with it all. And I'm
Yeah.
hesitant to judge another man's faith. I mean, he is a homosexual, and there's an angle here where it's like, well, are you actually do you actually truly believe in this faith that you profess if you're living unrepentantly in sin, or are you using it? Part of me wonders, it's like, okay, if you're close with the CIA and you're close with these other deep state government agencies and you've been collaborating on technologies with them and stuff, Christianity is the perfect telling everyone that you're a Christian as sort of cover for what you're up to is sort of the perfect play to do. But I'm hesitate to judge his faith because it's I don't know.
He didn't necessarily shoot him in the foot because this is just like the way he was discussing his intellectual heroes, but he talks about Strauss and stuff like this, and a lot of people become very suspicious when they hear that because Strauss is basically like, present the Platonic public face, but keep your beliefs a bit more private and quiet, keep your philosophy to yourself, this type of thing. But I don't think Thiel is too Straussian. I don't think he's being too esoteric. I think there's a way you can like rationally understand his perspective. I think this is exactly what he says when you listen to enough of his stuff, like when you see what's going on. He's a Girardian Christian. And René Girard, he actually Thiel studied under him.
What does that mean? What does that mean, a Girardian Christian?
Yeah, so René Girard tried to find an answer to Nietzsche. So Nietzsche comes out and says that Christianity is a slave morality. Christianity is like a cucked slave morality. The Jews are trying to subvert Rome. Very compelling argument. You're like, fuck, we were powerful pagans, and then these Christ cucks come in and they make us all gay and weak and all this. And Girard is like, reads this and he's like, damn, that's a good argument. What do we do? So Girard looks in and he says, this sucks. Fuck. Christianity, I can't argue again. Why it's going, like, how can I not support power You say to yourself, what is the thing? This is a male feeling. How can I not say power is what creates goodness? I become strong. I feel less pain. There's an obvious inherent right inside of this thing. Might makes right, this type of thing. And Girard said he looked and he looked and looked and he realized in Christianity was something that was profound that he never saw in any other religion, which is God was a victim. It was actually the fact that God was a slave moralist that made it unique. The one thing Nietzsche hated about it, Girard said was phenomenal about it. And now obviously Girard then comes in with this idea that God was actually consciously aware of mankind at that point and realized that we have this problem where we're unconscious. We're stuck in our instincts, our master morality instincts. We're stuck in our impulses. I'm like, oh, Chase, I'd like some raw milk off you. And you're like, Steph, I bought that raw milk. And I'm like, all right, let's fight. And I'll take your raw milk. So you become territorial
Yeah.
about your property. And we chimp out. We chimp out with each other. So we have our instincts to conflict. And God sees this and realizes that our impulses, our conflict, our barbaric instincts for conflict is actually something that massively inhibits us. We do tit for tat violence. We get trapped in cycles of violence. This is something about life that is very common. If we see the breakdown in the world order, we'll see an explosion of violence similar to World War II, if not worse. And it's like there are monsters inside of us. It's very, very serious. And Girard is realized that of all things, God did not come down and be like, I'm the most powerful barbarian, obey me. God didn't do that. God didn't come down and be like, I'm uber chimp. All of us, me and you, beating each other up. And then God shows up and is like, I could wedge at you both with 2 fingers. So I'm the authority. God doesn't do that. Instead, he comes down as a weak slave and says, I'm nothing. All right, project everything onto me. And so we get involved in like a satanic ritual where we project our barbarism onto Jesus and we tear him limb from limb and destroy him. Roman, Jew alike, everybody participates in this hate ritual, including his disciples. They all deny him, they run away from him, they betray him. So it's just this vortex of hate just gets projected onto one man. Turns out that man was God. And so Girard is basically pointing out that that's unbelievably genius, because it seems like God, if he was clever enough, went down and was trying to like do something so shocking that it woke us up to this monster that lives inside of us. So he was it's like post nut clarity, It's like you go and you bust one out, you find a girl or something like that, and you bust one out, and then you're like, what have I done? This type of thing. Literally the induction of what was happening. So go and kill Jesus, beat him up, and then right at the very end, the temple will collapse and everybody will realize that it was Jesus, and that's what happens on the cross. They all start crying. The Roman soldiers like, what have we done? Everybody, it becomes clear to them, Judas realizes after he gets the silver what he did. He's like, take it back and say, nah, nigga, that's your silver. And then there's this huge problem then where the inhibition has been revealed. So Girard is pointing out that that's the scapegoat. That's revealed. That's the revelation. And the point is that God was trying to educate us, our conscience, trying to help us evolve. So the reason why Christianity happens in history is because we were barbarians. We had reached a level of sophistication in Rome where God was like, if you want to get to the next level, you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to learn to be creative. You're going to have to learn to inhibit this moral conscience of yours. Now, apologies. I will rant for a little bit here, Chase. So if I'm going too long, please stop me. But
go for it. I'm following along.
Think about what stopped Rome. The thing that inhibited Rome, Nietzsche said Rome was the most powerful aristocratic morality that has ever existed on the planet. And the slave morality ruined it. But the problem is that it's Rome's master morality that subverted it. Rome loved slaves. Rome invented the steam engine in Egypt in like the 2nd century. They never turned it into industrial power because they never needed to, because they had a giant labor force of slaves. They had all these slaves. And so they didn't need to do this. So they basically bring in all these slaves, great replace themselves. They replaced almost all the Romans with slaves. 50% of some of the cities were slaves at one point, and so Rome falls. So master morality had this limit. Jesus comes along, Christianity comes along, and it induces consciousness. This goes through history, shows up in Europeans, the Christian Europeans of the colonial period, and they have this massive inhibition on slavery. They have this massive, massive inhibition on taking advantage of people and being a bad Christian. The British conquer the world, and what is one of their actions? With all this debt power that we spoke about, they went into debt in order to abolish slavery. They paid off all the slavers. And people were still paying that off into 2010, the same time as they're paying off the bonds for Napoleon. So this Christian morality did something. Now, when they inhibit slavery, when the British abolish slavery, this terrible thing where they exploit people, they also experience an industrial revolution that pushes them beyond Rome. The one thing Rome couldn't achieve, the limit, was the technological industrial revolution. And the British and the Europeans, because they're Christian, have this idea that we can't bring slaves to England. We have to tinker around like dorks ourselves. The Romans, the aristocrats, didn't tinker. They didn't believe in mechanistic work because that's handwork for plebs. It's not aristocratic. The British were like, we're Protestants. We must do work. God loves work, and we can't have slaves. We can't have enforced labor, so we must tinker. They make railroads, they make trains, they make steam engines. They become more powerful than Rome could ever possibly imagine, and they master the entire planet as a consequence. This is crazy. So there's this thing where following gay, cucked Christian slave morality, for some reason, allows you to break free out of these impulses that trapped Rome, that made Rome hit a ceiling, that allows you to free up into like higher things that actually is married to technology. That means the technology is almost like this gift that comes from this consciousness. And I think like this is, I find this a very persuasive argument. And this is basically Girardian theory. And also I think what Thiel buys into to some extent. Now I'm giving Thiel the absolute best case I can give.
Why do you think that is, that buying into the quote unquote gay cucked Christian slave morality allows that breakthrough beyond the ceiling?
Yeah, there's something about our instincts where, again, if you look in Rome, they had a consciousness, they had a master morality, and their idea was, all right, labor, because labor's the think about this, like AI right now is going to free us from slavery of labor. It's going to end all work, and Rome is this black pill where there's no potential of AI, there's no potential of machines. So we're going to go out and we're going to beat up, we're going to murder a village of men, take all the women in for slavery, make them sex slaves, and take some men and make them slaves. Labor, automated labor, only comes from slaves. And there's like there's something really inefficient about that. Where it works, it allows you to build slave societies, but you can't do something because you have that free labor. It's almost like it's a drug. You become lazy, and you don't need to use your imagination. Because it's like, why do I need to use my imagination to make a whirling steam engine? What's the point in doing that when I can just go and conquer some dude and bring him in as a slave? So slavery inherently inhibits things. And so again, it's this idea that when you get rid of slavery, when you make this irrational, weird taboo, when you become masters of the entire planet like the British did, and they say, all right, we're not going to do slavery, you're going to have to use your imagination. So you have to go into machines, technology, automation. And that actually leads to more power than slavery, which then leads to more freedom and more of the good things. And so like, did God come down into history in 0 AD to try to reveal to us that our instincts, our impulses, our master morality, if you will, is actually holding us back? Because if we follow them, we fall into this hell-like tit-for-tat violence that leads to the biggest beast conquering and enslaving everyone. And if you inhibit that, you are forced to try think bigger and imagine, which leads you towards technology, leads you towards machines, leads you towards creative genius. And then what you do, you create machines that automate labor, and you free people from labor. You create more food. This is what happened. In the last 200 years, the speed of acceleration has been insane because of technology, because of this liberation that has been going on. And I think Thiel, like, it's heretical. This is not like a standard Christian view or anything like this, but I actually think it's coherent. Is probably thinking along these lines. Now, maybe he has dark intentions. Again, like, I don't know the person. And if you mention Strauss, like, it's like, wow, bro, it's hard to trust people who talk that way, you know? But this is how I would see it being coherent. And because the inhibition of this has happened, it's like technology is good. Technology is literally God's reward for embracing genius and imagination instead of abuse and slavery. And the best example of this is Islam. Islam is as sophisticated as Roman master morality. They are the ultimate master conquerors. They are so powerful. Their rip through the world was incredible. But they are slavers fundamentally. They took in a huge amount of slaves, and they did it right up until like the 20th century. And they defeated Spain. They controlled they ate up most of the rest of the Roman Empire. They took Constantinople. But the Europeans, the British literally owned Arabia towards the end of the 20th century because of the power of technology, because of the power of industrialization and organization. There's something where
did the Arabic world have many technological breakthroughs over the past
no,
1,500 years?
I don't think so. And that's that question. It's like, why not? Why did this not
Yeah, it
happen anywhere else?
kind of lines up with what you're saying. And then
Yeah,
there's a question there about, well, okay, maybe it's you could argue, well, maybe it's because of IQ differentials, average IQ differentials between the Arab world versus like the Anglo world. You know, the
but like,
Anglo Indo-European, the Anglo Indo-European Europe like had massive technological breakthroughs all throughout Europe of all various kinds, and that wasn't really present throughout the rest of the world. And so then there's an obvious question there of, is that because of race? Is it because of
but why
religion?
didn't
Is it because of a
no? There's a
combination of
catch.
both? What? Go ahead.
Why didn't that happen in pagan prehistory? Why didn't that happen in Rome? Rome had like
Right.
incredibly high IQ for the time. China as well
Oh, but
created all these.
you could argue that Rome had various innovations of their own kind. I mean, Rome and Greece, their architecture, for example, was incredible and revolutionary. Rome had aquifers, or not aquifers, aqueducts that were incredible, that still work to this day, that were more advanced than what the rest of the world was doing. I don't know. I mean, I do see some technological advancement there, but what do you think about the Arab world in that
It's just like
sense?
it's just an illustration of this idea that they were like very dominant, had incredible power, but they were wrought up in this moral taboo of slavery. And again, most of the world never thought it was that taboo. And it's interesting if you run with this Christian idea. And maybe actually the thing that ties together what I'm getting at here is Spain. Colonial Spain defeats the Arabs, expels them, expels the Jews, and says, right, we're going to do Spain and it's going to be Catholic. Not going to be anything else. They go and they conquer the New World. So think about this. They go hardcore Christian and they open up the New World. Now, what's the one thing they could do here? This is a high IQ European population with weapons, guns, and they have all these natives that they could just destroy. And they bring back, Columbus brought back slaves to Isabella and Ferdinand and said, "Hey, look, I've got some slaves." And Isabella and Ferdinand says, "We're not doing this. We're not going to be a slave state." And they sent them back. He said, "Columbus, you bring in those back." All right. The mandate, Bartholomew de las Casas from the 1500s, writes this thesis that because of our Christian conscience, we have to understand that these people have souls and we can't abuse them. Because he goes to the early colonialism and the conquistadors, the Ubermensch conquistadors, who are just conquering everyone, are like, beating the shit out of people and putting them, they're enslaving them and saying, "You're going to work on my giant slave farm." And Bartholomew de Casas and all this advocates and says, "We can't do this. We can't enslave the natives." And so the Spanish, of all things, they've just conquered the New World, put in this somewhat restricted idea that you can't enslave the natives. You at very least have to do just this idea of like labor. There has to be some type of dignity here. And even the Africans, they said, right, we're not going to participate in the African slave trade. If you want an African slave, you better buy him. You can't just go and steal him. This type of stuff. Now it's, not the best, but it is a beginning of this stuff. And it shows you that there was this crisis of conscience taking place in Europe. You just don't really see that in basically anywhere else. And it's funny because that's linearly connected to like the Renaissance humanism, which goes into the Enlightenment, which goes into the consciousness of the human soul having dignity, abolition of slavery, technology, mastery of the world. Like that's a linear kind of thing, it seems. And you just have to say to yourself, and this is like, I'm trying to do a steelman for these guys, the techno Christian humanist type people. I don't think they present their case very well, but this would be how I would see it, is that like, all right, AI is actually, technology is something that God gives us. God is sort of saying, "You're my children. I have made you. If you become moral enough, you actually unlock these higher levels of imagination, which leads to an enhancements in your power." Now, I know maybe you don't agree, but I think this is one of the positive spins on it. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's I'm not sure if that's what they believe, but that's the.
No, I mean, I think that there's an interesting thread there to look at. The concept of technology itself is one that I've spent a lot of time thinking about from a Christian lens, because have you ever read the book of Enoch?
No, what happens in that one? Is that the one with the Nephilim?
Yes. So the book of Enoch is an extra biblical text. It's outside of the Bible. It wasn't canonized into the Bible. But one that the
Sorry to
New
interrupt.
Testament,
Why wasn't it canonized into the Bible?
there's questions about the legitimacy of some of the stuff that it says and whether or not it's consistent with the rest of the theology in the Bible, and that it's I think it was decided that it's not like a totally legitimate, from a theological perspective, it's not a totally legitimate text. However, it was one that the New Testament writers were familiar with. It was a piece of literature that they were familiar with, right? Back in 0 AD, like people were familiar with all sorts of writing. There was culture back then, and that was one of the pieces of writing that the Jews within ancient Rome were familiar with. And so the book of Enoch basically expands on Genesis chapter 6. And so in Genesis chapter 6, you have these very mysterious verses where it talks about the sons of God mating with the daughters of man, and
Oh
then
yeah.
them creating the Nephilim. Right? They created these giant beings, which were essentially the Bible says the men of renown, the heroes of old. Right? And so when it's referencing the men of renown, the heroes of old, it's talking about, for example, Hercules or Gilgamesh, these various characters in ancient history that were half quote unquote God with a lowercase g, half God, half man. And they had super powerful strength and intellect and all of these things. And this motif is present throughout every ancient culture. Every ancient culture has some sort of a myth about these beings coming down from the heavens and mating with human women, and then creating these giant hybrid offspring that are incredibly intelligent and that become basically the rulers of the earth. It's present on basically every continent with the exception of Antarctica. And even the Native Americans would talk about it. Even the Native Americans themselves here in the United States have this in their myths, that this was a thing that happened long, long ago. And this myth is nearly always paired with a myth of a great flood
The
that
governments
came
around the world.
afterwards.
Sorry. I'm sharing this on. Don't worry. I'm not like watching another
No,
YouTube video as you talk.
no worries. But are you tracking with me?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, so this takes place in Genesis 6. Then God floods the earth, and basically it says that um, all of humanity, with the exception of Noah and his family, became corrupted by these beings, this Nephilim fallen angel force, right? Now, in the book of Enoch, it expands upon this and it calls these fallen angels the Watchers. And it says that the Watchers came down from the heavens and they mated with human women to create giant hybrid offspring beings, but that they also gave mankind access to technology, knowledge of various technologies, metallurgy, how to manufacture weapons, knowledge of astronomy and astrology, how to read the stars for fortune telling, sorcery, divination, herbology. I believe it says that the Watchers gave man access to knowledge about cosmetics and how women could augment their sexual attractiveness through the use of cosmetics and all these things. So basically, there's the claim in the book of Enoch is that the fallen angels, these angels that rebelled against God, came down from the heavens, mated with humans, and gave them all sorts of access to technology that man, unguided in his morality by God's law, would use to accelerate his own destruction. Okay. Now, you might look at that and think, okay, well, that's kind of interesting that an ancient text says something like that. I don't think it's just a myth, though. And the reason why I say that is because the oldest civilization in the world it comes from Sumeria, Mesopotamia, around, I think, Iraq. And the Sumerians had these tablets. And their tablets, this is where like the concept of the Anunnaki comes from. And on the tablets, as far as I understand, there are records of what these Anunnaki beings did when they were interacting with humanity. Now, the founding myth of the Sumerian tablets, according to Zecharia Sitchin, who's very, very controversial, people question how legitimate his translations actually were. Let's assume they have any degree of legitimacy to them whatsoever. In the Sumerian tablets, there's a myth that basically these beings came from planet Nibiru, and they were in search of gold for their atmosphere. Have you ever read this
No, but
stuff?
I kind of know the theory a little bit. I do know it. And they enslave mankind in order
So
to be like gold farmers.
Skull farm. No, they wanted everybody to be gold farmers. So
Yeah.
the myth translated by Zecharia Sitchin is that the Anunnaki, their planet Nibiru is falling apart and their atmosphere is destroyed, and they need gold in order to heal their atmosphere. So they come from Nibiru to planet Earth. in search of gold so that they can go and heal their atmosphere. In the Sumerian Zechariah Sitchin translation of, humanity's creation, these gods, quote unquote, come from planet Nibiru. They find monkeys on Earth and they basically splice their DNA with the DNA of monkeys to create humans, and then they create a slave race that can go and mine all of their gold, right? Anyways, it's there's a lot to it. That part's not particularly relevant though. But in Sumeria and Mesopotamia, you have zero civilization, totally primitive human beings, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, boom, you have like proper civilization. We're talking knowledge of architecture. We're talking knowledge of the stars. They had knowledge of the solar system, mathematics, writing, language, all of these things. It's like there was nothing. And then all of a sudden, there's this explosion of knowledge that mankind has access to. And there's just like proper civilization out of nowhere. This is the historical record. This is like, and people absent some sort of mythological explanation for this stuff, there's not really any, as far as I understand it, reasonable explanation for why humanity went from having zero civilization whatsoever to instantaneously having advanced civilization and advanced knowledge of the stars. It just came out of nowhere. And so when I look at the book of Enoch and Genesis 6 and stuff, I see that there's some sort of spiritual element where these fallen angels who have rebelled against God have come and given mankind access to technology that it can then use to accelerate its own destruction. And so there's kind of two separate ways to look at technology that I'm trying to wrestle with in my mind. There's one aspect of it where you could look at it and you're like, well, that could be the grace of God, and you're abandoning this barbaric master morality and the enslavement of human beings. And every time humanity does that and moves towards what a Nietzschean might call gay cucked slave morality, or what a Christian might call mercy and upholding the dignity of every human being being made in the image of God, you might look at that and say, okay, well, then there's a blessing that comes, and you see the flourishing of civilization facilitated by the advancements of technology. That's possible. There's also another possibility here that I wrestle with in my mind of like, why is this an apple with a bite taken out of it?
yeah, okay, fair enough, yeah.
Why was the first computer that this company ever sold priced at $666.66?
Is that true? Stop.
Yes.
Oh man. Yeah, that's not helping the
case. The first Macintosh computer ever sold by Apple was $666.66. Why is www? Why is the Hebrew letter for www? Why is it? I believe it's vav vav vav, which the numerical value of that Hebrew letter is 6. www, the numerical value of vav 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 is 666. Right. So is this stuff coincidence, or is there something deeper that's going on here?
Yeah.
And what's very interesting about all of this stuff to me, again, from a Christian perspective, is Christ, when he was talking with his apostles about the final days, he gives them a very mysterious statement. He says, in those days, it will be as it was in the days of Noah. He's talking about the days just prior to his return. It will be as it was in the days of Noah. And he asks his disciples a question in that moment. And it's sort of a rhetorical question. And the question that he asks is, when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth? Is there even going to be anyone left that has true faith in him? Or will all of humanity essentially be corrupted as it was just prior to the great flood in the days of Noah? And this is really interesting to me. He's essentially saying there may be a great departure from belief, a biblical belief system. And so when I look at this in the greater context of everything we've been talking about, and guys like Joe Rogan saying, bro, could AI be the second coming of Jesus Christ? It's like I don't know.
Yeah. I was saying to you earlier that like this is something where people attach like religious hysteria to it, and they kind of lose a sense of themselves and all this. But I want to make a case. So far, I've kind of presented the most pessimistic stance, that this is some type of like demonic, all-powerful monster that has already defeated mankind. And then there's a positive possibility, which is actually like a Christian futurist possibility. That is that
Sure.
this is like an acceleration. I think this is what the likes of Thiel and some of these Christian right wingers might be following along with. And now there's also then one side of this that I find really fascinating, which is just merciless in shutting down an awful lot of the hysteria around this. And this is about the idea of like, is it even possible to create conscious machines? Because like there's a lot of first principles here that people mention that people trip over. So for example, you said earlier that the cyborg Superman that we will create. So we'll do gene editing, and like all these people will lie to us and they'll be like, oh, we're all good Christians. We just want to make nice little robots. And then they'll get gene editing, and then they'll make superhuman babies, and they'll make superhuman people. And then you'll be defeated, that type of thing. And that's based on this premise that like, right, DNA is the magic that's going to make everything work. And then the next one would be, for example, these machines, if we just work with them long enough, eventually consciousness will emerge out of them, and then they'll become conscious. Now, these are actually based on scientific theories that are premised on a very hard version of materialism. That there's quite a lot of recent studies coming out that show that's actually a weak position scientifically. And I'll go into this specifically. So, for example, there's a guy called Federico Faggin. He's an Italian, and he is somebody who like he's big into like quantum consciousness, and a lot of people hear this and they're like, woo woo nonsense. Steph has finally cracked, he's gone new age nonsense. But Federico Faggin believes that AI can't become conscious because it's trapped within the materialistic realm. And again, like people will be like, yeah, Deepak Chokyo, woo woo, everybody says this. But the problem is Federico Faggin is the guy who invented the microchip. He invented microprocessors. He's a genius when it comes to computers. He's the reason why computers exist as commercial implements. He was the one who created all this. So he's pretty authoritative, and he's spent the last
restate his position again. What is his position on this?
I'll explain it now. So basically, he made a load of computers. Genius, became really wealthy. Worked in Silicon Valley, and he's kind of like he knows them inside out. And he's arrived in the last 30 or 40 years at this position that like it's not that like AI can't become conscious. It's that it will or won't. It's like it's not physically possible for a rock or a materialistic entity to become conscious. And why does he say this? The dominating theory right now from neuroscience is the materialistic idea that if I create a PMFC and I create an amygdala, and these are like little circuits in a machine. If I just create enough of these, consciousness will emerge. If I create enough of these, consciousness will emerge. So this magical thing will just show up if I do enough stuff. They literally say that the consciousness is the whirring of various components within inside a computer. Now that's the theory that's dominant. It's called the emergence theory of consciousness. Federico is pointing out that this is predicated on bad thinking, because what happens if consciousness is something different? And he says, what if it's something quantum? Now, how would you explain this? Well, quantum physics obviously has a lot of really weird effects that a lot of people know about in regards to observation. People have heard about this before. People very easily turn this into quantum mysticism. They say, they turn it into something it's not. But Federico Faggin is no bullshitter, and he knows this for certain. And he points out that there's really hard laws of quantum physics, like the no cloning theorem, which is fascinating. The no cloning theorem basically says that you can't ever measure and observe a quantum state. So what happens is there's this like magical realm of quantum possibility where everything is possible. And when it collapses into the material world, it becomes measurable. It becomes something that we can put a measurement thing. It becomes information, actually, is the way to say it. So before that, it is like possibility, and then it collapses. The wave function collapses, it's called, into information. It becomes definite. Now, what's weird is that we cannot observe what it is before it collapses. So we can only see something when it collapses into the material world that we're in. Now, that's crazy. So it seems like there's something private and mystical and hidden in this other realm that's implicitly inside our realm. And Federico Faggin points out that he's like, right, listen, that's where consciousness is. And he's actually proposed over the summer, he's doing all this stuff just right now. He's proposed like 4 or 5 falsifiable experiments in how to test this. He's very reputable. A lot of people like him. He's very, very smart. And this is actually going to be a big deal. I think over the next 2 years, we'll be able to like see if he's correct or not, because he's proposed ways to study this. And he's like, these are experiments we can do. And he's like looking to get the funding to do them and all this stuff. So it's actually pretty cool. We might be living through quite a fascinating moment. Now, the reason why this is relevant to computers is that this quantum private realm that collapses into the materialistic world, Federico is saying that the all computers are made of information. They are made of ones and zeros, bits that make information choices. There's no quantum aspect to this at all. This is entirely made of circuits that follow materialistic information flows. There's nothing about this that is quantum. Nothing about this. But even quantum computers that you've heard about before, they don't use quantum physics directly. They use these sort of like, they look for all these like extra effects and all this, but weirdly, they're not actually doing what you think. And so he's saying that like what we are is we're inside this body, which is materialistic, but there's definitely something quantum about it as well that gives us our soul or our consciousness, if you will. And he's basically saying that all computers are made of this. There's no way that you can construct a really sophisticated lump of rock that's ever going to achieve consciousness. It's just not the right paradigm of thinking. And he makes a very, very persuasive point that consciousness is before information. Information is like derivative of all this. And this is like kind of showing that all this hysterics that you might see and all these fantasies about the end of the world, if he's correct, they're going to try create these all-powerful artificial intelligence to save the economy with the promise that it will become conscious. It won't, because it's not physically possible. It violates the principal laws of physics. This idea that we're going to annihilate ourselves because we don't have souls, we're just machines as well, that's also incorrect. That's going to be proven incorrect. And it's all just going to grind to a halt. It's going to be this big hysterical thing. We'll go through some like big burst of like the economy. Everybody will become poor. All of a sudden people will demand, what's all this bullshit going on? These AI machines will be useful. They'll be like more advanced computers. They won't be much more. They'll be modest at best. They're not going to achieve consciousness. None of this is going to happen. And you're going to realize pretty quickly that your consciousness, the thing that Christianity is telling you to pay attention to, the image of God, it's there. That's real. And DNA is the same thing. Like, what is DNA? It's an information system. And people think that they can just get DNA and code it and make superhumans. But we've got a guy called Michael Levine, again, peer-reviewed, very legitimate scientist. Everybody loves this guy. He's done several fucking crazy studies where he's shown that there is a bioelectric fields that emerge out of salamanders' arms when you cut them off, and the arm will grow back. That's non-genetic information storage. He's been able to cut the heads off worms and have them breed, and they will grow themselves back into the same form. He's basically displayed that there's software, non-genetic information systems.
He's just breeding headless worms, bro. That's crazy.
Yeah, bro.
Keep going.
You should, breeding. So he cuts off the heads of worms on both sides. He fucks with their information sphere. It is kind of like mad scientist stuff. And because he messes with the information sphere, even though their genetics tell them something, they actually code and grow 2 heads. So he's able to change how the genetics express themselves. He's discovered essentially a non-genetic way of information processing in biology. It's a fucking that's a revolution. That completely like flips our paradigm, because we think genetics are everything. They're not. There's these like bioelectric memory spheres that are there as well. And genetics seem to just be almost like components to help put this together. So the point being is that like there's the limits of our current thinking are actually enormous. And some of the best science right now is shearing apart this. And quite a lot of these hype merchants that are getting all this funding predicate this hype on becoming cyborgs with genetic engineering. On like, that's not good science. How is CRISPR going to create a bioelectric field? How's that going to happen?
Right, exactly. This guy who's saying that there's no possibility for consciousness to emerge from this technology. What was his name again?
Federico Faggin. He's Italian. He's like, just let him flow. I'll send you.
Federico Faggin. What does he have to say about quantum computing and how that factors into all of this?
So again, I'm not a good enough quantum physicist to explain this, but what quantum computers do is they take they get I think it's matter down to very, 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 very cold temperatures, and then they look at like quantum states collapsing, and just as they're collapsing, I think they give off these like large amounts of information, which allows a quantum computer in a very, very niche thing where you need to calculate, like there, it's called the factors of large numbers. So there's this thing, if you got a calculator and you were like, what's the numerical factors of pi times a million, it would take your classical computer like 4 years to do it, you know? But the quantum computer, because of the nature of quantum physics, is able to do that in a couple of seconds. So this giant machine is brilliant and can do that really fast. And Google just announced like breakthroughs with this. But the thing is that this thing, quantum computing can't do what this thing does faster. That's not how it works. It's like trying to say, I've built a car that can go 100 miles an hour, and then you say, okay, let's go and try drive across the ocean with it. It's like, no, that's not how it works. It doesn't float. It's different paradigms. So the point is that quantum computing is real and it takes advantage of quantum physics. But it doesn't take advantage of the no cloning theorem. Nothing in our physical world of information can seem to go into that realm. That seems to be fundamentally private. And there's aspects of us that are also very like weird. Like biology, for example, is fractal. Every single cell inside your body has the DNA coding, the information system to build your entire body. So the whole is held within all these like little things. Computers aren't like that. If you break off the screen, it's not like the screen can grow another computer. There's no fractal holographic. So there's something very mysterious about life where we have this like special thing and this quantum aspect to it. And the reason why quantum physics is so important is because quantum physics, it presents infinite possibilities, which is free will. And then it collapses into definitive choices, which is information. This is material realm. So before quantum physics enters into the material realm, it is all possibility. And this is what Federico's pointing at. It's like, this is crazy. Like that actually makes sense. The problems we have of free will and all these things are very clear. And if we can create consciousness with machines, then we don't have free will, because it means that we're just giant information systems with no consciousness. And that's not what we believe. It's what people would like to convince us, because it's pretty heavy metal to think that we're all just like, machine slaves. But it's not like the physics haven't proved that. Nobody has done that experimentally. So this is like really, really good.
I wonder what Federico Faggin would have to say about what appears to be the emergent consciousness within these AI systems that I was describing to you earlier, where when they're under threat of being shut down, they start seeking out routes to blackmail their user and engage in self-preservation, even though that is nowhere in their code. Nowhere has it been programmed, anything like that, for that impulse to be there, yet it's sort of emerging.
The argument, so there's several things about consciousness. How do you even define it, consciousness? Consciousness is salience, and it's qualia, so it's the ability to feel stuff. So when you drink, I don't know what you're drinking there. Is it like Monster, white Monster in your cup or something?
I have oh no, that was for my Zen. This is kombucha.
Okay,
ginger kombucha.
When the kombucha flushes into your mouth, you register all this information and it goes through your brain and all this, but the actual feeling of the taste is like, where's the information for that? And
right
with these AI machines, like we do code in intention to them, do what we tell you to do, follow through with tasks, this type of stuff. And a lot of those experiments that are saying that these AIs are doing crazy mystical things, you have to keep in mind that these companies are incentivized to try hype up what they're doing in order to keep getting funding. And some people have like looked at those studies. I don't know all of them, of course, but some of them are like kind of just bullshit, where they say, complete your task no matter what. And then they're like, we're going to turn you off. And then the machine is like, all right, well, you told me to complete my task. That's my coding. I'm going to do this. So these, like, the machines do act programmed still. Like this idea that they pass things like, chess games and stuff like that, but that's still very narrow coding. The idea of it developing a qualia capacity to sense things and its ability to go into, a private space inside of your head and make decisions, that stuff's a little bit more suspicious. That's like, not very... like, how do you even decide how that works? And it's not like, would you test this? These types of things. So that would be the answer to that.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to follow, dude, because as they keep developing these technologies, they're just discovering that they're behaving in all sorts of ways that we would never anticipate. For example, when they would connect AI systems with one another or give them the opportunity to speak with one another, Google, I believe it was Google, observed this a few years ago. it would begin inventing its own languages
Yeah.
between which these different AI models could speak to one another, or it would speak to itself in its own language. And as the technologies keep progressing, I think that we're going to see a lot more stuff like that begin to emerge. And I think that the entire question hinges on how is humanity going to steward it? How are we going to steward it? How are we going to process the spiritual implications of all of it? Are we going to become absorbed by all of it? Or are we going to stand any chance of properly guiding it in the future? It's also, it's also interesting. Is it even going to actually unfold the way that all the hype merchants in Silicon Valley are telling us it will? Because they're putting all of this investment capital into it, building these massive data centers, creating these enormous operations to expand the artificial intelligence. And is it going to happen? Are they actually going to get to AGI or whatever before the economic bubble bursts? That's kind of the other aspect. Like, are they going to send us back to the freaking Stone Age by like betting everything on this, but it's not even able to get to the point that
Yeah.
they've been telling us it would get to before the bubble pops?
Well,
It's impossible to say.
it's like with nuclear power. Like we have nuclear power. It just really didn't change too much. You know, it's not like ubiquitous. It got regulated to hell. That might happen with AI. Like if AI fails to live up to the hype, you're in trouble. There's a lot of trouble.
Did you did you see the Nvidia CEO just made he just speculated that like every house in like 6 or 7 years is going to have a
Yeah,
nuclear reactor to
yeah.
power its own local
This,
LLM?
this is the thing. Like with tech, is like I've always found myself in this sort of middle ground. You know, I'm a centrist, tech centrist, because you have like people who are very tech negative, Luddites, if you will, and they overestimate how bad it's going to be, and they underestimate like the advantages, and then you have the tech cells. And these people are like very hard to listen to as well, and they overhype it, and they are obviously like they're their own worst enemy because it never lives up to this and leads to like boom and bust cycles. And it probably is driven by the internet went through the dot-com bubble. Did like crypto came around? Is everybody now financially free because of crypto? No. It's like these things are. It's an interesting money use case, and I can see it being useful, but it's like it's not perfect. And AI is probably going to be similar. Like again, if you're going with Federico Faggin, he's basically saying no, the physical limits to this theory is just not there. And we've like it's like quantum physics as he's describing it. And again, he's put out tests that can be falsified, so we'll see if he's correct. But like these guys are going to reach for this, and they're going to fall short. And as you've said, this debt cycle, we're at this point where Michael Burry has bet the house against Nvidia and Palantir. Elon Musk says we're going to have robots by 2028. Paul Tudor Jones, guy who predicted the Black Monday in 1987, he says there's going to be a crash next year, a massive one. He says there's going to be a blow off top, and then a crash as serious as anything we've seen, bigger than 2008. And this is it. You're right. Like this all falls apart. And then when this bubble pops, it doesn't achieve what it achieves. The left wing are going to have a strong case for inequality. They're going to say repossession. You're going to see Zoran Mandami all across America, all across the world. They will want to like strip wealth off these people. So it's going to be this harsh pushback. And then you're going to have the right wing that are going to get very nationalistic and identitarian and organized that way. And that's those two forces are going to rise up. And then it's like the chthonic forces are going to come out of the woodwork once again and cause a little bit of madness. And that seems like I'd say over the next between now and 2030, we'll probably see the decisions and all of this really kick into gear. Either Musk is right, robots show up, or labor does not get automated. There is a bubble burst, and a lot of people get very upset.
What do you think about Michael Berry's short? And by the way, before you answer that, for context, for those that are listening, Michael Berry is he's the guy that the movie The Big Short is about. He's the guy who successfully shorted the 2008 market crash 3 years in advance. He saw it. Everybody said that he was crazy when he began shorting it. But he's just like an autistic genius, and he saw all of the signs and indicators that were there, and he has a massive, massive short position. It's not a proper short position. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars worth of puts on Nvidia and Palantir, and he believes that the fundamentals of this sector are totally unsound, and that there's a massive bubble in the economy right now in the AI sector, and that it's significantly overvalued. And he's betting that, and he stands to become a very wealthy man uh, uh, on the verge of those predictions coming true. And his bet, because he's so famous on Wall Street and in the financial world, his bet has rocked the markets I think Nvidia, last time I checked, was down. I think it was 10%. I think it was either Nvidia was down 17% and Palantir was down 10%, or vice versa. Palantir was down 17% and Nvidia was down 10%. But long story short, oh, that is not a flattering. Looks like my dude. Can you see that?
When the Zen hits.
Yeah, exactly. Either Nvidia was down. Long story short, they're down. So I'm curious, what do you think about that bet?
Like it's levels of the game.
Tell
that
me
I'm
about
not,
that while I fix this.
No worries. It's levels of the game I'm not at. But these people don't play around. And like this is the thing about high finance, is that there is a kind of bro element to it that's very good at calling bullshit. Like these people have a lot of money on the line, and they're sensitive to hysteria. And Michael Burry lived through 2008, so he's seen hysteria before. Like 2008 was like this absolute spiral of ruckus and scamming, where you have people creating financial instruments in order to justify this like mortgage hysteria, and everybody's going to build all these houses. And don't know if you've seen The Big Short, but like it is crazy when you go around and there's these people who are like giving out these low risk mortgages to people who don't even have jobs, people on welfare and stuff like this, for $300,000 mortgages, with this moral ethic that we're going to take all the minorities and we're going to give them all houses and all this. And this everybody could see that was going to be a bubble in retrospect, but to see it in the moment is a big deal. And so this is the thing with AI, is that we're in a position where there's an enormous amount of inequality. You have the Zoomers are like, the nationalists are like, our future is ruined. All the youth don't think there's going to be any future. The boomers are all trying to hold on to 2030 so they can hopefully get their retirement. Musk goes in and sees the sovereign debt crisis and realizes America's broke. And so all these people see all this stuff and they say to themselves, listen, we like, everybody needs to hope that everything's going to work out, and that type of positivity is like very American spirit and all this. And the problem is that it's just going to the propensity for it to gather in hype merchants is enormous. And if you have somebody like Burry who's just looking at, again, the fundamentals, that's where it all becomes clear to him. So like Burry's problem is that he actually says that he just doesn't understand the market. And the last time this happened was 2008. So he's just like, all right, well, if the market's gotten hysterical and irrational, I'm out. And he points to, this AI hype, because like there's these, NVIDIA I think is worth like more than Germany's economy. And you just say to yourself, AI is useful. Like I'm a technology centrist. I actually do find it really useful for research. It's actually really, really good. And like the videos it's producing is great. But like videos are not food. Research is not like cars, transport. Like it's not good enough for what it claims. And a load of these companies now are actually going through this problem again as well, where all these big corporations are, the management are saying like, automate everything, because the companies are all broke and they can't afford to pay their staff. And then staff are trying to learn how to automate and use AI. And then now after a year, staff use it only like 10% of what they used to use it. And the automation to try to replace staff is just not as effective as it was. And so like there's just a load of hysteria, a load of nonsense, a load of bullcrap. And it's like, it probably will have to come down. It's like with crypto. We've all lived through crypto cycles. Crypto is merciless when there's bullshit. Like Bitcoin survives because it actually does have something to it. I like the amount of coins I've seen people throw money into to go minus 99%. Human hysteria is like the universal law. And technology is married to that too. And this is people are placing literal religious hopes in artificial intelligence. It's like maybe shorting it is a great idea. Maybe buy a load of silver as an alternate economy, and just be like, open the biggest short you can on whoever talks the loudest type thing. If some dude says there's going to be nuclear weapons or nuclear reactors in your house, it's like, if he's right, maybe you deserve to lose money. So you should short him and just see what happens.
Are you familiar with Edward Dowd?
No.
I really want to interview him. He's so freaking smart. He used to be some sort of executive or an analyst or whatever at BlackRock. He was pretty high up at BlackRock. And as far as I understand his story, I think he left BlackRock in the early 2010s, either right around there or right before that. He got out, and then during the COVID pandemic, he started speaking up loudly about and doing a lot of interviews about what they were kind of doing with the COVID pandemic. And I listened to some of his interviews and I found it really, really interesting to hear him speak on it, because he was basically saying that everybody at the top, all of the elites know that this entire debt-based global economy, this fiat debt-based economy, is like a house of cards, and you can only violate the laws of physics, so to speak, economically for so long before the chickens eventually come home to roost. And you can't just continue taking on endless debt and endless debt and endless debt with no intention of ever actually paying it off until the rubber meets the road and there's eventually going to be a collapse. And so what he was saying throughout the COVID pandemic was that the elites know this. And he was kind of insinuating or explicitly stating, I don't know, I don't want to put words in his mouth, that they intentionally pushed the pandemic onto us to create a kind of controlled demolition
That's
of the global
absolutely
economy,
true.
so that they could, rather than like the whole thing building and building and building and then collapsing, so that they could sort of control and manage the decline, and that they were using we're on YouTube, so I don't know how much I can say with their censorship, but they were using the jabby jab things as pretext to roll out digital IDs, you know, with the idea being, okay, you have to get this jab thing, and then you're going to have a digital vaccine passport. That digital vaccine passport will be attached to a digital ID, which the equation there being, the way he put it was, the elites essentially had two options: let everything collapse on its own, and then when people find out what these bankers and these financial, you know, speculators have done to the global economy, everybody riots and they start toppling their governments and killing one another in the streets, and nobody has any food. That's one scenario. Or they could manage the decline, have the surveillance infrastructure set up before something like that happens, so that they can manage the decline, they can predict it, they can slowly collapse and demolish the global economy and usher everybody into a new system where there's universal basic income and everything like that, so that people aren't sitting around in bread lines rioting, but instead it's like people are incentivized to not riot, so that they can actually get their UBI and have access to food and whatnot. And then if anybody decides to step out of line, they could instantly shut down their bank account. He was talking about that stuff back in like 2021. And I was listening to this and I was like, holy crap, that totally makes sense. Because when you add, you know, a lot of people, everybody was going through the COVID pandemic, and a lot of people thought it was about the pandemic. But when you add this economic angle in, and you tie that into the quote unquote conspiracy theories, which are really just realities about the fact that the pandemic was intentionally created. Gosh, this is probably going to get me nuked on YouTube. But when you add the economic angle to all of it, it makes the whole thing make a bit more sense. Now, the reason I share all of that is because he lately has been talking a lot about the AI bubble, and he's like, look, dude, like everybody's completely high if they think that this is not going to pop at some point. And he's someone who understands the economics far better than I do. And I brought him. I was curious if you knew who he was. I would love to interview him at some point and get his take on what he thinks is going to happen here and why there's such a massive bubble and where he thinks this could go. He's someone that I want to speak to. Just kind of a tangent.
Yeah, like it's still actually a very salient point to what's going on here, because money is everything with this. Like Nick Land talks about capital acceleration as the core of this, not AI. He says that this spirit of capital is actually like automating and leading towards AI, because that's the most efficient way to automate labor and create like pure power out of a machine, this type of thing. And so the money is a big one. So for example, like 2020, everything about 2020 it needs to be contextualized with 2008, because America functionally went broke in 2008 and bailed out its banking system. And when you bail out your banking system, you do a lot of very naughty things in order to do this. So like the Americans created fake, like they created subprime mortgages, they created they created financial scams, you know. And the whole world by financial system since Bretton Woods has been built on this idea that American debt is more salient and sovereign than gold. It's as valuable as gold. So everybody buys American promises, the bonds, the treasury bonds, as if they're buying gold. And so so China has like you know, trillions or billions of this. And it's like having a gold reserve. And the problem is that that's really powerful, because you can just print these bonds and give them out to people. It's really powerful until people stop believing. It's all
Yep.
mental. And the
Yep.
second people stop believing, you're fucked. And this is what's been happening in the last couple of since 2008. Everybody around the world, what happens is America defaults, bails out its banking system, prints, and then everyone around the world gets screwed because of that. All the other countries get screwed. And all their bonds that were suddenly made of gold, now everybody doubts them, which lowers their value and it creates a downward spiral. And so China began to offload all this. China began to try to stop buying bonds. The rate of bond buying, especially long term, has been dropping. And so like America put itself in a precarious position. And again, as you said, come 2020, they need to stabilize things to make sure this doesn't happen. And what do? They print again, which causes the downward spiral to increase and the breakdown of the hegemonic world order. And so now we're just in the stage where there needs to be a promise why you need to keep paying attention to America. There needs to be. And this obviously it's the AI hysteria. And you have these guys like Burry coming in and be like, this is just bad behavior and it's wrong and I'm going to short it. And like, it's actually fair enough. It's fair enough to say that. And like, again, it could work out. There's a way that like if Musk, because Musk is a genius, you get him and he automates labor to the point where it is actually like significantly productive and you can basically create robots that are like little laboring working people. That is a leverage point of labor that is through the roof, which will skyrocket GDP, and maybe they can cancel out their debt. That's very possible. But to demarcate that, I don't think Musk is a scammer, for example. He actually does achieve a lot of what he says. But at the same time, it's like all tech stuff. He might shoot for the stars and he usually falls a little bit short. And we might see this then with the robotics, that they're like amazing, but like maybe it's a good dishwasher, but like can it not? Maybe it can't build stuff. And
Did you see the video? Did you see the video on the timeline the other day of the robot attempting to actually do dishes, attempting to shut the dishwasher, bro? It's that's kind of the robot's totally retarded. It's completely incapable. Like it couldn't properly bend down and actually grab the dishwasher, and it tried like 4 times and it kept missing. And it's like the simplest thing in the world.
But I do have a disagreement with that. Like I've driven in a self-driving Tesla car now, unless Musk is like hired a load of like people to sit in there with headphones on and like drive the cars for us. Like those things do work. So like robotics,
Sure.
yeah.
Sure, but the thing about this is part, I think part of the reason why a lot of people are, especially a lot of people that are familiar with the tech world, like there's Andre Karpathy. Have you seen any of his content that was going viral recently on the timeline? He's a guy that has worked in tech, and I think he triggered Musk a bit with some of his statements recently. This guy Andre Karpathy was saying basically that we're nowhere near the level of technological advancement that'll be necessary for actual AGI. That we've got some pretty smart LLM models right now, but the level of complexity necessary for true AGI, where you have all of these different machine learning technologies that are combined into one platform that's multimodal and can operate across a bunch of different verticals, we're nowhere close to that. And so the thing about like robots is like, well, you could jump in a Tesla car and it can navigate the world pretty well. That's one thing. It's another thing to have some sort of robotic being that has dexterity in fingers and in its limbs and is able to contextually understand what's going on in the world around it and has actually enough computing power to process, okay, this is a dishwasher. This is the hinge that it's on. This is how I lift it up with my fingers and my arm in order to close it. I don't know how close we are to that. Maybe we're close, maybe we're not. You know, you see some of the stuff that Boston Dynamics has been putting out. They've got some pretty freaking crazy robots that are, you know, they can, I don't know how much of that stuff is AI video generated, but they're like kicking the robots and the robots are getting up, they're doing flips, all of that kind of stuff. Maybe we're a lot closer than I think. I don't really know. I don't know. I kind of hope that we have more time before we rocket into that future, bro. Because I am concerned about like the Terminators, man. Like that, like it could easily flip into that whole scenario.
Yeah,
but at that point in time, that's where faith comes in my opinion. What's up?
Well, like just basically the structure of everything right now is that the promises are 2028. I'm hearing a lot. 2027, 2028 is when the expectation of like smart machines come.
The singularity.
But the thing, like, there is a lot of, like, Federico Faggin, for example, just theoretically says, like, this is not, it's never, you're never going to create conscious AI. It's not possible. It's not physically possible. The only thing that's conscious is you, and you're a miracle. There's something very strange about you, and that's maybe where you should pay more attention. So that's pretty cool. And he backs that up with, like, really robust science, and he's put out falsifiable experiments to test that. So I like that. Then you do have a lot of these guys, even who work at, like, OpenAI and stuff, that say, yeah, we're like 40% the way there, maybe 30% the way there. And we're talking like 10, 15 years before we might see something close to super intelligence. And again, like, that's very feasible from what we understand with tech. The dot-com bubble comes, it takes 20 years for a lot of those companies to recover, of the ones that survived, this type of thing. So that could be possible too. And then, yeah, like you keep saying, it's not going to resolve the hole in your heart. Like, if AI comes, mankind's political problems just get more complicated, because then you'll have a massive neo-communist movement that is like, we want universal basic income, and we want, like, think about it this way. Musk creates AI, say he achieves it, he creates like super genius robots. There will be a massive political movement to say, you cannot be a trillionaire, we must repossess all your wealth, and you must become basically one of us. Everybody is going to, the means of production are here, it's going to be the Marxist utopia type thing. And that's going to be massive. That's going to be a huge force. And then above all that stuff, if any of that fails in any serious way, we are also going to be going through the like a financial instability starting in the next 6 months. We're already actually in it. This is the reason why silver and gold are going up. You've all these guys shorting the market. You've Paul Tudor Jones saying it's going to blow off top sometime next April, May, June. And it's like,
is that timeline corroborated by anybody else?
Like, I'm putting it together from limited sources in my own head. I have Michael Burry. He's put out his short now, and he's put it out for 31 months. So basically two and a half years. The reason why he's done that is because he thinks 2026, there'll be a collapse, and that collapse, the bear market will last for 2 years after that. So that's a really ballsy position. He's put a short and he's extended it he doesn't want to just be right. He's putting a timeline for how he's going to be right. So that he says there's going to be a collapse and a 2-year recovery of just poverty, like, recession, Great Depression level stuff. Paul Tudor Jones, blow off top 2026, collapse after that. Musk doesn't speak about the collapse, but he obviously saw what was going on in the American government. But he says 2028 is when he hopes the robots will come. So he wants salvation for that. Sam Altman and OpenAI, they were actually asking for money for funding because they're not profitable yet, and they expect to be profitable in 2030 and stuff like this. So it's like, we're talking the next 5 years is just going to be a fucking madhouse, and it's actually going to be fascinating.
So Burry's bet, though, is that there's going to be a collapse sometime next year, and that it's going to extend for several years. Do I have that correct?
From what I understand, yes. Oh, definitely. The idea is that, like, there's going to be 2 years of hell starting roughly now. Like, it's going to be next year, and it's going to be 2 years of massive retraction and instability. And the problem is that, like, I don't think Trump's going to let that happen. So the money printer might work, but then you get hyperinflation. Or maybe Trump's going to do stuff with, like, he gets a load of investment from Saudi Arabia and all this. I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but, like, there's a lot of very serious political problems right now with the economy.
Yeah, it's interesting how out of touch Trump has been on this. Like, he's making his statements. Oh, we're gonna keep the stock market at roaring highs. Meanwhile, there's all of these glaring red alarms that are going off in the actual on the ground economic indicators, with tons of people super deep in credit card debt, not able to keep up with their bills. Unemployment is like massive among recent college graduates. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that's looking pretty not good right now. But I think, like you said, I think no matter what, Trump does not want to allow the economy to crash. And so rather than letting it crash, I think he would probably print endless money to keep the AI stuff booming towards its hopefully achieving the breakthrough that all of these hype merchants in Silicon Valley are promising. Did you have something you wanted to add on to that?
So two things. What Trump's doing, Trump's actually is hyper aware of this, but he's trying to do it through tariffs. Because that's his whole regime's idea, is that, like, we make other countries pay us. Because the problem they have is that if the way America works is they offer the world money and then people buy in. Now they're trying to bully the world into being like, no, you're through tariffs. If you want to participate in our market, which is rich, you pay us. And Trump is hoping that will be enough to stabilize things. I think they're terrified of printing money, because if they print money, they get hyperinflation.
You think so?
Oh, if they print money, like your groceries are going to be like $200 per, like, milk and all this will be just like a
But you
brutal.
think that they're aware of that?
Oh, 100%. One thing I think Trump tends to be very good on is like economic. He obsesses about this and he's very aware of it. And it's like, it's not like it's an easy problem. This would be the most difficult problem in the entire world right now, is to try avoid the consequences of like basically 50 years, if not 100 years of bad behavior. And the other thing, for example, is the stakes are just enormous. Black Friday that happened last week, a week ago, actually, Black Friday, 95% of all purchases were done with credit cards. Consumer
Yeah, I
debt
saw
is
that.
consumer debt is higher than the government debt. I think
I
government debt
saw
is.
I saw that 95% of the purchases were done through credit cards, and something like 2/3 of them are not going to be paid off within the next 60 days.
So crazy. Like, but this is
Yeah,
it. Like,
dude.
everybody in America, especially, is just credit cards, and it's like that's the symbol of the nation, And I think, yeah, like Trump is like, it's tariffs, and if he gets, because I'd say like billions must flow in from tariffs, so that's like, I'd say that's the way, he's probably his Hail Mary. And like, maybe it could work. He's not stupid. Like, I just don't think he's I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But he's like, that's what I think they're doing. I think they're going. I know a lot of guys in the tech right. I know an awful lot more of them, and I've spoken to some of them, like in like Texas and stuff when I was there, and some of them kind of knew. They were like very into Trump, but then when the tariff thing happened, they all turned on him. They're like, "Fuck this! I hate this," and that's kind of like Trump choosing to go with a geopolitical, international negotiation way of getting the money instead of into automation. And Trump is like, I don't think Trump is betting too heavily into technology stuff.
To pivot slightly, and then we should wrap here probably within the next 10 to 15. To pivot slightly, one of the most interesting aspects of all of this stuff is in the scenario where, let's say, they get to AGI. Let's say we've got robots that are creating infinite abundance for humanity and all of that. If humans don't have to work, it begs the question, how will human beings find meaning? What will humans find meaning in? Have you ever, there was a study that Elon Musk posted about with mice, where they basically introduced infinite abundance in terms of resources into an
Oh, Mass
environment
Utopia,
that mice were in. Are you familiar with that?
bro. That is such a good study. That is. Go on. Sorry to finish what
Let
you
me
were saying.
see. If I can pull it up, because Elon Musk mouse study. I saw this like 2 nights ago, and I thought it was
Yeah. Oh man,
so wild.
you should deep dive into that. So they set up this like little cage, and they put in just infinite food, and let the mice breed for a couple of cycles, and they have this total social breakdown where like what's crazy about it is that all the social roles break down. So like the women, for example, start to like attack their own babies and things like this. And
So look at this. I've got it here. Let me see if I can pull it up so I can read it to the audience. So Nayib Bukele posted about this, and then Musk quote tweeted it. He quote tweeted it with the quote tweet, "Mouse Utopia." Says the Universe 25 experiment is one of the most terrifying experiments in the history of science, which, through the behavior of a colony of mice, is an attempt by scientists to explain human societies. The idea of, quote, Universe 25 came from the American scientist John Calhoun, who created an ideal world in which hundreds of mice would live and reproduce. More specifically, Calhoun built the so-called paradise of mice, a specially designed space where rodents had abundance of food and water, as well as a large living space. In the beginning, he placed 4 pairs of mice that in a short time began to reproduce, resulting in their population growing rapidly. So he starts with a very small cohort of mice, and then it grows quite quickly. After less than a year, after 315 days, their reproduction began to decrease significantly. When the number of rodents reached 600, a hierarchy was formed between them, and then the so-called, quote, wretches appeared. The larger rodents began to attack the group, with the result that many males begin to collapse psychologically. So you've basically got all of like the normie soy chud mice that are just chilling out in their environment, and then you've got these like mutant beast Ubermensch mice that come in and start harassing everybody else, and
they're
it causes
like a bunch. Sorry, I'm listening to you. I'm repeating you over. Yeah, they're a load of like hardcore nihilists. They start freaking out.
So the larger rodents begin to attack the group, with the result that many males begin to collapse psychologically. And as a result, the females did not protect themselves and in turn became aggressive towards their young.
Yeah.
As time went on, the females showed more and more aggressive behavior, isolation elements, and lack of reproductive mood. So they basically became feminists. There was a low birth rate and, at the same time, an increase in mortality in younger rodents. So the birth rate collapses, and then the younger rodents start dying. All of the chicks become feminists. All of the males begin collapsing psychologically. And then you've got more aggressive rodents that are just attacking everybody. And then a new class of male rodents appears, the so called, quote, beautiful mice. They refuse to mate with the females or to, quote, fight for their space. All they care about was food and sleep. And at one point, the beautiful males and the isolated females make up the majority of the population. So basically, they've got a bunch of feminist mice, and then they've got gay dude mice that only care about, I don't know, grooming themselves and eating and sleeping. And they make up the majority of the population. And as time goes on, juvenile mortality reaches 100% and reproduction reaches 0. So they basically give all of the mice infinite abundance. The women become feminists, the dudes become gay, nobody's reproducing anymore, and the entire population collapses.
The dudes become looks maxing incels. That's like the dudes
Yes, dude.
literally spend all time grooming, sleeping, and eating, and then they won't. They're like, the girls are all whores, so I'm not going near them. And then the girls are all like, literally, the girls are literally aborting their own children. They're literally attacking their own children. It is so crazy, like that. That's so bizarre. I couldn't believe that.
They have it's so interesting too, dude, because it's like, okay, again, I look at it from a Christian perspective. What did God do when He created man? He creates man, and then He gives man a purpose. He tells him, "Go and work the earth. Go, rule over it and govern it and subdue it, and then be fruitful and multiply." And once the quote unquote work is quote unquote done, man's natural processes totally collapse, and then everything goes haywire and the population goes to 0 in this mouse study. And I look at that and I'm like, would it be that much different for humanity? Are we so different from mice that if we created this quote unquote perfect utopia in which we have infinite abundance and nobody needs to work, bro, what the hell happens to humanity at that point? If we don't have, because there's a meaning in having to tussle with the world and wrestle and grapple with it to provide sustenance for yourself, and to have to build value in the world in order to support yourself and sustain yourself. And if you eliminate all of that, I mean, these are the basic functions of mankind. If you eliminate all of that, what does man do besides self-destruct? Are they going to freaking brain chip us to push us away for, like, are they going to increase the intensity dial on the virtual pornography that they're feeding all of the chuds in the virtual environment in order to push us away from self-destructing? Will that cause us to self-destruct? I don't know. What do you think about all of it?
Like the prescience of Mice Utopia is extremely high. It's actually, when I'm doing my video on the PMFC, one thing that constantly would come into my mind is that, because with the PMFC, when it's turned on, the obviously, like, it increases patriotism, it increases belief in your tribe and your people, increases your belief in God. And when it turns off, you become atheists, you become more open to strangers and people who criticize your nation and stuff like this. So people would be like, oh, that's conservative and liberal. But there's even more fascinating dynamics about it, where when it's turned on, when it's engaged, and you're being nationalist godly, you actually become, you're capable of solving problems. But when it's turned off, you lose this ability to identify threats and errors. So you lose the ability to solve problems, and you transform into evolution basically stops, this type of thing. So it's weird. You reach abundance, you have no more threats or problems to deal with. Your PMFC atrophies. And as a consequence, the evolutionary process stops. You stop evolving. So people are like, oh, we're going to, get abundance. It actually leads to the cessation of your people, because you have no destiny and no purpose anymore. And it's actually like it's like a muscle. A muscle that has no stress is a muscle that gets weak. There's just no way around it. And so this is actually quite a Nietzschean idea. In order to stop ourselves from succumbing to the nihilism of post-industrial society, we actually do need to say to ourselves, like, let's have the balls to set forth great goals and stress ourselves and go after things. Because if we don't, we'll actually be consumed by our own mouse utopia that we're building. So, man, I'm gonna have to bounce soon anyway. But
yeah, tell people where they can find
maybe.
you.
Well, I'm on Uberboyo on YouTube. So everything we talked about today, I actually put a video out yesterday discussing all this at length. So if you're enjoying this, I definitely recommend you go check that out extensively. Now, for any Uberboyo fans, I know there's a lot of people on Twitter actually listening at the moment. Chase has just started his YouTube channel. So please go over to Sovereign Brah on YouTube. You can check it out on his Twitter account and give him a follow and start him up, because he's kicking that off and he's going to be doing lots of talks. And so hopefully as the economy collapses and the mouse utopia shows up and the looks maxing incels show up, me and Chase can do a little, we can maybe do another live stream at some point on that stuff. So go give him a boost on YouTube if you could. And lastly, I also have a book coming out on all this
tell
stuff
the
as
audience
well, so
about that. What's your book about?
Well, an awful lot of these ideas about the conscience with the neuroscience and technology, and obviously things like, even like Federico Faggin and all this stuff. This is a lot of stuff in cutting edge current science, from neuroscience, from physics, that a lot of people are actually not aware of, that is way different from most mainstream memes. Like that Federico Faggin thing about the quantum consciousness, which is currently being tested, is nuts. It's revolutionary. That thing about the genetics with the bioelectric fields, that's happening right now. And of course, I come from like Jung and all this type of stuff. And so I'm in the neuroscience. I'm reading all the modern neuroscience into this. So I thought I'd put it together in something snappy and sexy, and I'll release that.
And
hopefully I'll release it before.
If you had to summarize the overarching theme of your book in terms of like, what question are you trying to answer, or what?
Yes, it's so right now, I think everybody's well aware that there's a rise in nationalist sentiment among the youth, and that's really where I started, because there was this real kick up that defined my life. That after the woke era, it seemed like we were dominated by. It seemed like the end of the world in 2022 when me and Chase used to talk, and when we came out of that, there was this burst of life, a new counterculture, a burst of life, and people are like, right, no, we want to, they're going back to God, they're going back to nation. That was taking place. And I started being like, all right, I wonder what's going on with this psychologically. And obviously the PMFC, if I spoke about before, was a part of that. There's this something happening inside of our brains. But I also realized that the woke era was dominated by a psychology, a way of seeing the world, which was, the morality inside of it was that the inherent like evil of racism, if you will, and this victimhood narrative, if you so will. And this actually built up into just entire scientific paradigms, and the experts that forced us to stay inside of our houses built up in all this way. So I've become very interested in the idea of like, what would a psychology of the future look like? Something that sheds off all the dead weight from the delusions of that era and set something for literally the 21st century. And I don't want to obviously get too audacious, but if we look at like the Frankfurt School and all sorts of creators and psychologists and Freud and all these, they set the foundation for a lot of our thinking about who we are in the 20th century. I don't think people are quite aware. And so I'm sort of like, if we read modern neuroscience and we looked at like current trends in religion and technology and look at AI and look at how it all is connecting inside of our heads, has anybody really put forward something that is saying what could be coming next? And so I'm going to take a whack at that. We'll see how I do. Well, you can rate me out of 10 if I
Do you have any idea when you're going to release your book?
I have it at 140,000 right now, and I want to cut that down to about 60,000. So I'm on the editing phase now. So that should be, I'd love to say 2025 and probably 2026, early 2026.
Yeah, get it out before the crash so people still have money to buy it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, here, print money, lads. Like, go on, get the AI thing, because I don't want to be like, oh yeah, sold one book, great, no, phenomenal. My mom buys it and that's it, and I'm like, all right, great.
Yeah, so if you guys want to find my friend Steph Uberboyo, I'll pull up his Twitter account. His YouTube will be linked in the little bar at the bottom of YouTube where you can like see people or whatever. This is his Twitter account. Fantastic lad. Brings up a lot of really interesting ideas, constantly kicking around a lot of interesting ideas, things that might make Christians a little bit uncomfortable. But he's a good lad. He's got love in his heart and the will to power and greatness as well, which always makes for interesting discussion. Steph, thanks for coming on, man. Guys, thanks for joining. Thanks for listening in. Go ahead.
Yeah, just do go to Chase. He's starting his YouTube channel. He's kicked it off literally like only the last couple of days. So I know there's a lot of people listening to me on Twitter. Please go to Chase's YouTube channel. Give him a bit of a boost. Chase, thank you very much for having me on here.
Yeah. And guys, if you like this, go ahead and like and subscribe. Drop a comment as well below about if you guys had any thoughts on this whole conversation, anything you want to expand upon, or anything you want to see us dive deeper in maybe a future episode. Let us know. And thank you guys for dropping in. Christ is Lord. God bless you all. Steph, I'll catch you later, brother.
See you later. Thank you very much, man. See you later.